Man, listen to that bass.
Welcome, everybody. It is September 10th, 2023.
I could go back to 2011.
That's the year I turned 21. Actually, right around now, I think I was going through a really rough breakup, like a fiance breakup in 2011.
Ooh.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I was the problem. I was the problem. That's me fresh out of Mormonism, not handling the identity crisis very well, and not having let go of a lot of the misogynistic and it was my fault. I deserved it. Anyway, welcome everybody. This is the Sunday Show. I'm Jimmy Snow, and I'm joined today by Matt Dillahunty, as happens most Sundays, though lately Matt Dillahunty hasn't been joined by me the last two Sundays. How you doing, Matt?
I know, and I was incredibly disappointed. So welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. We had so much fun on Wednesday. I've got a news item that I want to touch on. I know we're getting calls. I put out notes, but I haven't logged all the way into Call In Studio yet. So boom, now I did.
It's all good.
This is from Hemant Mehta's Friendly Atheist. So if you go to friendlyatheist.com, you will find Hemant Mehta, who's been basically the greatest secular journalist of the last 2 decades, in my opinion. Full disclosure, we are friends. And but I can't tell you, like back when Dennis and back when I was doing nonprofits, 15 plus years ago, even when it was just me and Dennis, it should have been me and Dennis and Hemant, because all we would do is go out to Friendly Atheist, grab the news items for the week, go to 1 or 2 other sites, and then use those as news items to talk about. I'm not very good at promoting my stuff. If you go to patreon.com/atheist debates, that's my personal thing. You can go there and contribute your dollar bills to support what I do, but also you can support Call the Line. But genuinely, I really think people should consider supporting Hemant Mehta, because I don't think people realize just how much all the rest of us rely on his news. That said, here's the story. Baptist pastor falsely claims autism is demonic. My God doesn't make junk. Pastor Rick Morrow infuriated many parents who don't see autism as a problem and in need of supernatural convention. On Wednesday night, Rick Morrow of Beulah Church in Richland, Missouri, said that autism was caused by the devil and prayers alone could heal the developmental disability. Morrow argued that the only alternative to that theory was that God created children with autism because he doesn't like them very much, but he rejected that option because in his view, God doesn't make junk. Well, if God made you, I think you might be a refutation of that thing there, because Pastor Rick Morrow's ideas are demonstrably junk, as in junk science, junk humanism, junk philosophy, and junk religion. The sermon can still be seen on his Facebook page with the relevant bits starting around the 2-minute mark. And you can find more there reading Hemat's article on this. The thing is, it's for years, religions have made claims about mental health issues and claimed that they were demonic and put mentally ill people through exorcisms, through prayer circles, through laying on hands, bringing them up to the front of the chapel for everybody to gather around and pray on them, everything else. Rick Morrow, You are a monumentally ignorant piece of shit who should call into the show and present some actual evidence for what you say. Until then, you are just like every other garbage pastor standing up spewing what you think, even if it conflicts with all of the available information. You are a science denialist, you are a reality denialist, and you are a coward who is mocking people with autism, one or possibly two of which are on this show.
Yeah. I have a comment on that I feel like both addresses this and late-term abortions of people who have who like to scapegoat that with this whole concept of God doesn't make any junk. And I just think about one of the most common reasons, most might be wrong. One of the common reasons that somebody would even get a late stage abortion is because their fetus, or you could even call it a baby at that point if you like. And I think a lot of people who have to go through this by then do call it a baby because they have full intention of raising that child as a baby. And one of the reasons why people end up having to have a late-term abortion is kind of a compassion thing, because there's a condition within this baby that it is going to be born without kidneys. And as a result, basically, as soon as it no longer is relying on the mother system and is delivered, the blood will back up into the lungs. There's nothing that can be done to stop it. And the baby will, in front of the mother, or, I guess you could take it to the other room, but will basically immediately begin to drown on its own blood and die. And so late-term abortions happen when this is discovered, and it's usually a heartbreaking thing. And they basically say, listen, these are our two options. We can deliver. It will suffer. You will hear it cough and gag and drown and die, or we can simply put it to sleep and deliver it, and it will never wake up. And that's sort of the compassionate thing. And that is what a late-term abortion is. It isn't this thing that they like to pretend about, like, they're going in there with a power drill or whatever else. A late-term abortion is delivering a baby that has been induced to be stillborn because of something that's either going to kill it or potentially harm the mother, more often because of the suffering of the baby. And I think of that, and that is one of the things that people like this pastor scapegoat. But I also think of that in the my God doesn't make any junk argument, considering that I'm an autistic person, and you're right, your God didn't make any junk. We're better than you. No, I'm kidding. I won't be my autistic supremacist self that I sometimes fall into. It's a bit, but I will bring up that sort of thing, the sort of late-term abortion that everyone agrees is tragic. You would still prohibit them. You would make a mother give birth and watch that baby drown in front of her. But
when Jimmy says you, he's not talking about me.
No, not Matt. This, I actually don't know about this pastor specifically. However, the type of Baptist they are, I suspect it is true. But in talking about not having the junk, I would like an explanation for things like a baby being born without kidneys. I would like a baby just being stillborn in general, sort of nature's abortion that hurts a lot of people every year and breaks a lot of hearts. Or just, cancer. I have a younger sister. I think she's about 5 now. I have there's a 40-year range on me and all of my siblings. From the youngest to the oldest is more than 40 years difference. Wow. And I have 12 siblings, but my youngest sister had cancer at 2 or 3 years old. So as far as this God not making any junk, I don't know who's making, in your universe where there's a God, these things that isn't God, but autism, which we're now understanding as a spectrum, is just sort of a different type of mind to have. And while we use terms like neurodivergent, and a lot of people think of autistic people as very othered, it's now being more understood of like, no, these people are among us and have been among us. And in the same way that people have different types of physical builds, people have different types of mental builds. And this is one of them, ADHD, one that we're starting to understand in that world as well. How those are the junk your God makes, or would be if God made them, if they really existed. But you're letting God completely off the hook for infant cancer, genetic diseases. I actually have a genetic disease. It's the issue that why I've been absent. So I'm very, very confused on what is and isn't junk in this pastor's world.
Or there's things like the that parasitic worm, the African eye worm that pass on to humans through deer flies, and then the worm eats through your eyeball.
Yeah.
Come on now.
And it
Now,
blinds
I'm not going to say
children.
that's junk, but if God made it all, your God made some absolutely disgusting and dangerous things.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know how they, well, I guess I do. I do know how they justify because they don't justify it. They live in a world of cognitive dissonance. Anyway, I'm ready to go to, I could literally, we could do 3 hours on just this if you wanted, and I'm down, but of just examples of the hypocrisy and the cognitive dissonance. But I am glad you brought that up and brought it to attention. And you're quite right. There have been many times in the past, especially when I was primarily a current events atheist YouTuber, where I'd be like, all right, I gotta put something out. I've got a schedule I got to keep to, and I would go and check Hemmett's blog and go, what can Hemmett bring to us today? The
guy's a machine, and genuinely, I don't just run around pimping and promoting people. I talk about who I like and why and everything else. Hemmett is, in my estimation, one of the absolute best of us, and it just has repeatedly earned my support as one of the most level-headed, reasonable, trustworthy, and diligent individuals, especially when it comes to reporting. So I hope he makes $5 billion and keeps doing this forever.
Hell yeah.
Or at least, as long as we need.
Yeah. Maybe not billion, because then I have my ethical dilemma, how hard it is to
900 million.
Yeah, that's fine. Billionaires, it's hard to justify being a billionaire and not be evil. Anyway.
Fair point. You want to run the calls today, or you want me to run them? What do you want to do?
Man, I'm down for whatever. I'd say you should be in charge of this one. I'll probably take a couple extra bathroom breaks this time. The show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. Oh, wild. David in Australia. Pronouns are he, him. Welcome, David. You are on the Sunday show with Matt and Jimmy.
Well, I'm first up. This is my first call in. Big day for you guys. Today is Face Palm Sunday. You're going to notice something about the Bible you didn't notice before, and it's kind of embarrassingly obvious. I wonder if you could bring up Genesis 22. I'm speaking as an atheist here, by the way. I'm not playing.
I'm confused. You said it was Face Palm Sunday, and we're going to learn something. I'm confused, but all right. Let me get
right. Yes, we can learn something about them. It's just so obvious. Yeah, Genesis 22.
Okay, what about it? Yeah.
Okay. If you look at where Abraham goes crazy, I think it's line 5, where he takes a knife and a fire, and they walk off into the distance saying, I'm just going over here to pray for a while, I'll be right back.
Okay.
So, okay, would you do me a favor and read that aloud?
No,
starting
will you get to your point?
6?
Why don't we just get the point and we'll read if we need to.
First of all, I've done multiple videos on this story and multiple lectures on this story, so I'll be really surprised if you've got. I'll be really surprised if you stop fucking interrupting me. I'll be really surprised if you stop interrupting me. I'll be really surprised if there's something new. But I'm not just going to sit here and read the Bible. What is there a verse you'd like me to read? What?
Yes. I think it's 5 and 6. But okay, if you don't want. So Abraham takes Isaac, he's bound up with wood, and then they walk off, saying to the servants, you wait here. And then they go off and do the business, and then they come back. And the servants are still there. In fact, they seem to be lying down because in the last line of the chapter verse, it says, they arose and went on. So it's the servants who are sort of lying around, kind of relaxed. Sorry, I'm a bit tough to you. which seems kind of unnatural. Now, if you look at the episode with the knife and the fire, where Abraham...
David, I'm going to
walking
interrupt.
away.
I'm going to interrupt because there's already like an audio quality issue on top of this just feeling like reading the Bible. Can you just send us this in an email?
No.
David.
It's really new, mate.
David, can you just send this as an email? Hey, Matt and I will read it. Could you just send whatever this is you're trying to explain to us in an email?
Well, I already disagree. The verse where the servants are waiting around, you said that seems unusual. Why? Why would it be unusual for servants to do what they're fucking told?
It's so relaxed. That's
Why?
not normal behavior. But
You're an idiot.
that's a minor point.
Okay, no, stop. Listen. They were servants. They were told to wait. They waited. Abraham went off. You have no indication that they could see or knew anything that was going on.
Right. Okay. But if you think of what they would want to do, then they would want to do exactly what the angel did, which is they had conducted a negotiation from a voice from above, and then they provided an alternative hostage. And they had the means,
David, we're talking about the servants. The servants were told to wait there while Abraham and Isaac went off. The servants waited there. When Abraham and Isaac came back, why is it surprising? Stop, you interrupt me one more time and I'll fucking drop you like a hot goddamn rock. Why is it surprising that the servants stayed there where they were asked to stay?
Well, it's a perfectly normal hostage situation. And in that situation...
No, sir, there is no hostage situation. I'm going to mute you, and you're going to sit there and you're going to listen for a second. What the Bible actually talks about is Abraham saying, hey, you guys wait here. And Abraham gathered his knife and the wood for the sacrifice and his son Isaac and left. Isaac wasn't bound up right there in front of the servants. They left and went on to the place of sacrifice. And when they were done with the sacrifice, which you'd have no reason to think the servants saw, why on earth would the servants remotely suspect that there was anything even close to a fucking hostage situation? If Abraham told them to stay put, they didn't see anything. What on earth makes you think that they thought this was a hostage? Okay, never mind. You couldn't even fucking wait for me to finish. Goodbye, jackass. Unbelievable.
I was going to ask if he's had a bevy this Arvo, but it's all good. Jesus.
Genesis 22:3, and Abram rose up early in the morning, saddled his ass, and 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place for which God had told him. That's verse 3. In verse 4, then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. I see the place where God wants me to go for this sacrifice. And in verse 5, Abraham says to his young men, wait here with this ass, and I and the lad, my son, will go yonder and worship and come again to you. In verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, laid it upon Isaac his son, which means Isaac is carrying the wood. I'm sorry that this English translation of Hebrew was too difficult for you. It doesn't mean that he bound up Isaac there in front of them. He had Isaac carry the wood, and Abraham took the fire and the knife, and both of them walked off together. That's what verse 6 says.
Yeah, but if you look at no, I'm just kidding. If I was really trying to do a good impression, I've interrupted you. You gotta...
Verse 10, he took his knife to slay his son. 11, the angel of the Lord came out and said, here I am. 12, don't kill your son. 13, Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there was a ram. Abraham called unto the name of the Lord, the Jehovah, and said to this place, the mount of the Lord, it shall be seen. Verse 15, the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham for the second time now. 16, I myself have sworn. 17, that in the blessing, bless thee, and multiplying. 18, and in thy seed shall all the nations be blessed. 19. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. There is nothing remotely surprising about that. There is nothing at all that makes it in any way an indication that these 2 men had any fucking clue what transpired at the place of the sacrifice. If you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, stop giving Bible lessons. You make the rest of us look stupid.
What would the lesson have been if he was correct? Like I don't.
I have no idea.
Yeah, where would you even take it?
Anyway,
I've been informed that I said this Arvo, which is Australian for afternoon, but it is apparently 5 a.m. I suppose, is that 5 a.m. on Monday?
some people started early.
Yeah. It's Monday in Australia, right? They're ahead of us by a day. It wouldn't be Saturday 5 a.m. or
No,
today 5
it should
a.m.
be Sunday at 5 a.m.
Man, I suck at the globe. Because I thought New Zealand was a day. I don't know. Someone in chat will say it definitively because we have some Australians in chat, as I said here. What day of the week is it there? What year is it? I need that too. Which one do you like next?
Ooh, you sent me a question, but I don't in chat, but I don't know what you're talking about. So you have to clarify that. Oh yeah. No, he doesn't have Wednesday available, or I would have done it 15 times over.
That sucks.
Jacob in New Jersey, they, them is a theist who wants to tell us why atheists should be pro-life. So Jacob, welcome. You're on the Sunday show with Jimmy and Matt.
Hello.
Hi.
Go ahead. Lay it on us.
So do you agree it's moral to kill one person to save 1,000 people?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you agree it's moral to kill one person to save 1,000 people?
No, not necessarily. It might be. It depends on the situation.
Just a normal hostage situation.
It depends on the situation. There's no, the normal. The standard hostage situation.
Forgive me for not immediately rushing to the standard hostage situation.
Jacob, there's no way that this trolley problem is the justification for being pro-life as an atheist.
Yeah. By the way, pro-life has nothing to do with the morality. So stop making moral arguments. Pro-life and pro-choice are about the legality. And so if you think that we should be legally opposed to abortion, make the case for that.
Life is valuable, right?
No, not inherently. Boy, you really thought that you were going to call in with some slang terms and just like go to church later and be like, so then I said, life is valuable. Would you kill one person to save 1,000?
I would agree in the sense that I find my life valuable.
Yeah, my life is different, but that's what I said. Life has value that is given to it. Life is also a term that is bacterial life valuable? Do we value life by itself as a word means so much? So Jacob, give it another go, your best shot, and please refrain from using cliches. If you're going to do a wildly long pause, we'll move on.
Sorry. Wouldn't it be better to save one person, even if it causes some mild inconvenience?
Huh.
Probably.
Yes, it might be better to save one person if it causes mild inconvenience. You do realize, though, that the person who's pregnant doesn't just risk mild inconvenience, but their body is permanently altered by carrying a child to term, and that they risk death and other things. And at the end of the day, they are still sovereign, autonomous entities who get to decide whether or not somebody else gets to use their body without their consent.
You've also now used the term person, meaning you have granted personhood to something that hasn't achieved personhood, if this is an abortion metaphor. But again, if you avoided the cliches and the metaphors, we might be able to get somewhere.
Do you have like an argument? Or a fetus is not a person, not legally, not morally, nothing. An embryo, a fetus, those are not persons. They don't have personhood. They don't have a phone number. They don't have a social security number. They're not allowed to drive. They're not persons. But even if they were, Jacob, do you think one person has the right to use somebody else's body without their consent?
If it will save someone's life.
Wow. So you're okay with me using your body without your consent if it saves a life?
What do you mean, use the body?
Do I get to put you in a bed and filter my blood through your blood?
No.
Okay. If you're not going to grant that right to another person, why do you grant special rights to a fetus?
Well, I mean, the mother brought that life into this world, you know?
The life hasn't been brought into the world and the mother didn't do it. We're talking about a person who's pregnant.
With the baby.
With a fetus, yes, but even if the fetus was a person, you just acknowledged that that person doesn't have the right to use somebody else's body without their consent. And so if the pregnant person doesn't consent, then you have no right to force them to remain pregnant, correct?
I guess.
Jacob, if you had a son and your son needed a kidney transplant, could he force you? Should you be forced to give it against your consent? Not would you decide to give your son a kidney transplant, but could he force you to give you a kidney, to take your kidney?
No.
Right. Should that be the law? Should your son, who you brought into the world, be allowed to legally force you to give you his kidney? For you to give him your kidney?
Should he be able to legally force you to risk your kidney?
Maybe.
Maybe. You think your son should be legally allowed to force you to put your kidney at risk for him. Okay. Do I have that right to force you to put your kidney at risk?
No.
But your son does. Why does your son get special rights that I don't?
Because we will be related, we'll be family.
That's not, okay. Do you understand what rights are?
Yes.
I doubt it.
I bet you don't, because why would your son have a right that I don't have a right?
Well, life is valuable, right? So
answer the
if we can
question,
agree on
Jacob.
that-
Answer the question.
I didn't, whether or not life is valuable is completely irrelevant. Answer my question.
I think that everybody has the right to live.
Everybody? What's an
Are you going
everybody?
to answer my question, or are
No,
you just going to
yeah.
keep spewing crap where you haven't even thought about this and don't have any understanding?
Just more
Answer my
cliches.
question, because you're the one who said you understood rights. Why, for example, in the United States of America, should your son have a right that I don't have?
Because he will be related to me.
So you don't know
Jacob,
what a right is.
I'm trying very hard here. Rights are granted by a government. A government does not care who is related to whom. The right that you have is never contingent on who you're related to. Nobody should have special rights because of who they're related to.
But a parent is responsible for a child, right?
A parent is responsible for a child provided they maintain that relationship. If you bring a child into the world and do not give up your parental rights, then you have some responsibilities as the caretaker of that child. But that does not give the child the right to use your body or put your body at risk.
Yeah,
You're talking about
But you
what
have a responsibility
responsibility.
to that child.
No,
You have
you're talking. No,
responsibility.
no, sir. You're talking about what responsibility a parent has to a child. That doesn't give the child special rights to that parent's body.
the responsibility a parent has to their child, even legally, is not granted by giving birth. You get first priority. However, the state can take away your responsibility to the child, and you can give away your responsibility to the child. So the fact that you gave birth, while often resulting that, is not actually the determining factor on whether or not somebody is responsible for a child.
But before all that, the mother is responsible for the child.
What are you talking about before
We
all
don't
of that?
have a child. We have an embryo. We're talking about abortion. You can't abort a child that has been born. You can only abort an embryo or a fetus.
Where do you draw the line between those two?
Whether or not it's inside and using someone else's body is where we draw the line.
Yeah, the violation of human autonomy.
So what's the automatic difference between a fetus right before it's born and a baby right after it's born?
See, this is literally the thing I addressed at the beginning, where you scapegoat this concept of a short-term or of a late-term abortion as though that is what anybody is talking about. Late-term abortions, where they actually end the life of the child, is virtually exclusively done because the child was going to suffer and die, as in the example I gave at the beginning of the show, drowning on its own blood for being born without kidneys. So you're trying to say, what's the difference between the day before is if the day before the mother decides to, they don't want to be pregnant anymore, they deliver the baby. If the day after she decides she doesn't want to be pregnant anymore, they still deliver the baby. So the difference in the days is the difference, and that's it. Jacob, how old are you?
I'm 18.
These are just such, and that's not surprising. It sounds like I don't understand what you've been exposed to, that you have such a basic level. I'm confused that you're a non-binary person who doesn't apparently put any effort into social issues. One would have thought they would have crossed over. I guess I'll just be confused about that. I don't understand how you have so ignored so much about this issue that your argument would be, what's the difference than the day before? When we're talking about, we can talk about the different phases of pregnancy and how that would impact a person's decision, because it does. And your concept of, well, it's alive, therefore, is meaningless because individual sperm and individual eggs are alive. Zygotes are alive. And none of these things have anything resembling any sort of neural capacity, any type of brain activity, anything that you would grant any type of personhood. They are no more significantly human in having human experience and human awareness than a glob of mold on the wall. In fact, the mold on the wall may have a more significant experience. So I don't know why you would call into a debate show. I'm wondering if the reason you're pausing so much is that this is a prank call and you're pausing to hold in laughs or giggles as you waste time, because seriously, you need to spend time not with Matt and I, but with Google, because you can't get the most fundamentally basic things correct. So I will tell you how to tell if you're ready. If you can debate my side. What'd you say?
What'd you say, Jacob?
You're impossible to talk.
We are impossible to talk to, and yet you're talking to us. So you don't understand talking, you don't understand communication, you don't understand rights, you don't understand pregnancy, you don't understand abortion, and I don't understand why we're still keeping you on the line.
We're impossible to talk to because we won't do the basic homework that you have failed to do. You are ready to call and debate a topic with us the moment you could do it without us there, and we would agree that you're representing our side correctly.
Yep, he already dropped.
Fine enough, Jake. I'm not positive
it's embarrassing.
That was a serious caller.
Yeah, I don't either. First of all, I don't think anybody could have such an absolutely broken understanding of rights. And He called in to tell why atheists should be pro-life and then gets absolutely everything wrong. For the record, for anybody who wants to, if you Google my name and abortion, you will find a debate that I did many years ago against Christine Krzyzlnicki, who is an atheist woman who's a former Catholic, and all of her positions on abortion are basically holdovers from her Catholicism. But what you'll find there is a full breakdown in my statement of everything that you need to know, I hope, about abortion, about the fact that abortion is the termination of of a pregnancy. It is and the right to abortion is the right to terminate a non-viable pregnancy. It is not the right to kill. And the termination of a pregnancy happens at different times depending on viability. As Jimmy was pointing out, if it would have been the day before delivery, terminating at that point is a delivery, not an abortion in almost every case, except for like the illness issues where he pointed out. Prior to that, we're talking about termination that results in the death of the embryo or fetus simply because of the biology that would not allow it to survive outside of there. And if you're someone who wants to argue for a pro-life, or let's be honest, anti-choice position, because that's what it is, you should not be arguing about what is it the day before and life has value and all this stuff. You should be explaining why you think you have the right to force someone else to remain pregnant against their will, and why you are in favor of giving a fetus or an embryo special rights that no person on the planet has. Those are the key two things that you must address to have any hope of countering the bodily autonomy argument. And until you do, you're not going to change the mind of anyone who's actually bothered to take time to understand this.
By the way, that 1,000-to-1 argument, I was thinking about, I didn't end up going there, but taking Jacob down the right. Okay, if it's one person saves 1,000, what if one person can save, let's say, 5 people? Is it worth killing the one person for the 5? Because any given day of the week, a healthy person, if you die and are an organ donor, your liver can save 3 to 4 people if taken fast enough. Each kidney could save one person, so that's another 2 people. Your heart could potentially save another person, so now we're up to, what's that, 6, 7? Let's see, what other pieces of, quality of life you could dramatically improve for a lot of other people, but it's pretty much the liver, heart, and the kidneys that are the big lifesavers. So if you're ready to go and save, somewhere between, you may actually also have more liver. I think you have 3 to 5 liver nodes at any given time. It's been years since I took a nat and phys, but
we need Dr. Ben.
That's right. Dr. Ben will be on with Forrest tomorrow on Skeptalk. So maybe I'll ask him then.
It's almost like I psychically predicted and promoted a show on the line.
You made it happen. Do you want to take the other theist who wants to? Do you want a palate cleanser or stay on the abortion topic?
Oh no, there's 3. There's 3. We could. Well, let's see if we can just knock this out right here. Yeah, that's probably good. Shafiq in Cape Town, South Africa, pronouns are he, him, believes that a fetus has a right to life. Welcome, Shafiq. Do you think the fetus has a right to use someone else's body without their consent?
Yeah, hi, Matt. Yes, I do think that the fetus has the right to life. And the rationale for that would be that there's basically a dichotomy.
That's not what I asked.
It's whether you're religious or not religious.
That's not what I asked.
From a religious perspective,
Shafiq,
that's not what I asked.
Shafiq, wait a second.
That's not what I asked. I asked if you think a fetus has the right to use someone else's body without their consent.
Yeah, I would like to put it in perspective, if you'd allow me to.
I'm asking a question. I would like you to answer it.
Do you want to answer with a yes or no? The answer is yes, the fetus has the right to life.
That wasn't the question.
That's not what I fucking asked you. Do you think that a fetus has a right to use someone else's body without that person's consent? That's the question.
The fetus, Matt, please give me a chance to just express myself. And I don't know why you're swearing.
Answer. All right, I'm going to mute you. I'm going to ask the question. I'm willing to let you present your position, Shafiq, but I very clearly outlined what needs to happen. And I asked you a question at the start of this call. I would very much like for you to answer this question. If you answer this question, we will continue the discussion. If you do not answer this question, I will move on to another caller. I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going, right after I unmute, you'll hear a beep, and then I'm going to ask the question, and then I would like you to answer it. So I'm unmuting. There's the beep. Here's the question. Do you think that a fetus has the right to use another person's body without that person's consent?
I don't understand your question, Matt.
Okay. Call me back when you do understand the question. Bye.
No, I want to clarify the question.
No, I don't care what you want. I don't care what you want. That question is so simple and straightforward. The fact that you can't understand it demonstrates that we don't have any business carrying on a discussion. It's very simple. Do you think that the fetus should have the right to use someone else's body without that person's consent? So that person's consent, the pregnant person, you're saying it doesn't matter what the pregnant person wants, it only matters what the fetus wants. This is a very straightforward question. I don't give a fuck about your moral opinions on this subject. I don't give a fuck about your thoughts on abortion in general if you're not able to answer that very basic question. This is not the show for you to call in and try to spin your anti-choice garbage. If you could answer that question, then we could have a discussion. But because you can't answer that question, you are not qualified to have a discussion.
Shafiq is trying to call back. I'll just let the screener know to tell him to call back another week when he has figured out the question.
Yep. When if he tells the screener yes or no to that question, then we'd be happy to take a call. But there are theists waiting to call in, and some of them are going to have. I had one of the best debates I've ever had last night. Now, some people are going to say that wasn't a debate because you guys just agreed, and you're right. But it was the best discussion I've ever had with anyone who is a Muslim. And after me talking trash about how absolute garbage Muslim apologists are in general, it was really cool to be able to have something go much different. I'll be doing a debate review of it. I had a great time talking with Issa. If you haven't seen it, watch it some other time. But basically it was secular humanism versus Islam, which one is better for the world. And I think that it went exceptionally well. But there's one key takeaway, and that is when two people are reasonably well informed on a topic, are honest and willing to acknowledge when the other person has a point, and to actually answer the questions that the other person has. Issa answered my questions. I answered Issa's questions. We had back and forth. We acknowledged when somebody said something that was good and correct. There was no shouting. There was no irritation. There was virtually no talking over each other. But also there wasn't a lot of disagreement. And that's going to rub some people the wrong way because it didn't feel much like a debate.
Some people will find that boring.
Yeah, it is. But it was still a good discussion.
Yeah.
It is, despite what Jacob thinks, we're not impossible to talk to. The problem, Jacob, is that you were not equipped.
Yeah.
So, you ready for some theist calls?
We're impossible to lie to. That's not true, but
it's more. Oh yeah, I'm gonna skip that one for a minute here. We have Jack in Maryland is a theist, pronouns are he, him, has an argument against skepticism and for the supernatural. That's two different arguments, I would think, because I'm going to give you time here, Jack, but you do realize that an argument for the supernatural and an argument against skepticism has to be two different arguments, because all skepticism is wanting to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So you can do whichever one you want first. You can either present an argument against skepticism or an argument for the supernatural. But I don't know how you could do. You could try to do both at the same time, but I don't see that.
I know it sounds strange. I'm aware. By the way, full disclosure, I have called in before. Jimmy, I'm glad you're feeling better. I didn't really get to see the beginning of the show, but I'm glad you're back.
Word.
And yeah, what'd you say?
I just said word.
Word.
It's my favorite word.
Word. Yeah. Yeah. So just for clarity's sake, I want to be clear when I say that I have an argument against skepticism. I'm talking about the very specific sort of skepticism that seems to be laid out, I assume shared both by Jimmy, you, and Matt, regarding the validity of testimonial evidence. And as far as doing it at the same time, go ahead.
So first of all, skepticism is a philosophical position of wanting to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible and using the methods that best achieve that. Skepticism does not have positions on specific things, including the validity of testimonial evidence. So it seems that you don't really know what skepticism is.
Well, it was I apologize if I misspoke. It was just sort of a shortened way to explain it to the caller. I'm sorry if it was misleading in any way.
So do you think you have an argument against skepticism or just for the supernatural?
Skepticism, the only argument against skepticism I have is as it has been articulated on this show. I've watched you guys for a long time. So I'm
willing to bet money right now that you're going to present something that has nothing to do with how skepticism has been presented on the show, but go ahead.
Oh, look, Matt, I'm not trying to misrepresent you in any way, and I apologize if I do. In fact, I wanted to start off with a couple questions just to make sure that I am working from a correct framework. I like the Socratic method, so I thought we would start there if that's okay.
I like people to get to the point.
Yeah, we're 3 minutes in and apparently just getting started.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Apologies for that. So I get my first question would be this, and I apologize if you've already answered this to some extent. I
tell you
feel
what,
like I've heard.
Stop fucking apologizing for anything and everything and just get to the point.
Preamble, yeah. Jeez.
Okay. Matt and Jamie too. Or excuse me, Jimmy. Would you say that you only believe in claims with evidence?
For empirical claims that should be supported by evidence, yes. For other claims, for some other claims, the facts about reality serve as a sufficient framework to confirm it. For example, if Jimmy tells me that his favorite flavor of ice cream is vanilla, I'm willing to accept Jimmy at his word, despite not having any physical evidence beyond that, because I know that vanilla is a flavor. I know that people like those flavors. And I have zero access to determine whether or not Jimmy's telling the truth or not. So for that claim, I'm willing to accept him at his word. The other thing that happens is when I accept a claim, one of the factors is what has to change about my worldview if in fact I'm wrong. And so taking Jimmy at his word on his favorite ice cream preference, nothing about my worldview has to change if it turns out that Jimmy has lied to me or is wrong.
Okay. So that being the case, would you say also, and I'm asking this to Jimmy too, would you say that testimonial evidence is never an acceptable form of evidence in any of those cases, not in regards to favorite ice cream flavor or anything personal?
Okay. I have no problem at all with testimonial evidence. I just gave an example of it that you shrugged off. But whether or not testimonial evidence is sufficient to justify a claim depends on the nature of the claim. If you tell me you just got a new puppy last night, that is sufficient for me to accept it. It doesn't mean that I'm right. It doesn't mean that you're not trying to fool me, but it's sufficient for me to accept it. If you tell me that you just got a pet fire-breathing dragon last night, that is not sufficient. The nature and quality and quantity of evidence is dependent on the nature of the claim before determining whether it's justified. Skepticism doesn't hold that every claim is weighted the same.
Okay. So just to be clear, so what it sounds like you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that certain claims are of a qualitatively different nature than other claims, and as such have to be held to different standards of evidence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what defines whether a claim is a fantastic claim or a less believable claim? Like, what is the actual metric for it?
I literally just did a video about this on my channel fairly recently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And what happens is the claim is not in and of itself evidence for the claim, but what determines the extraordinary, so the common adage is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The reason I'm willing to accept your claim that you have a pet, a new puppy, is that I already have mountains of evidence that puppies exist, that people keep them as pets, that people like to talk about getting them as pets. There's everything about your claim of having a new puppy is consistent with facts about reality that are clearly demonstrated. If you said you got a pet fire-breathing dragon, that is inconsistent with the facts of reality. And therefore, if you were to like take a balance scale, we take everything that we know about reality and put it up against your claim that you got a new pet puppy. And if all, or put it on there with that claim. And if all of that overcomes any reasonable objection, this is all the way nature shows itself to be over and over again, then nothing else is needed. But when you say you've got a fire-breathing dragon, that conflicts with facts that we know about reality. There's been no demonstration that fire-breathing dragons exist. There's been no demonstration that people keep them as pets. There's been no demonstration that this is even possible. And so something more than your word is there. So the evidence for I got a pet puppy is your claim or your claim with relation to all of the evidence that we already accept about the world. And the evidence and the claim about your pet dragon is your pet dragon with all of the evidence for that in the world. There simply isn't the same evidence for fire-breathing dragons in the world that there are for puppies.
Yeah, I think I understand that. But the question that comes to my mind is that it seems like there's a lot which we base our understanding off the world of that is fantastic that we have nothing but testimonial evidence for. And I'm not just speaking about the supernatural here. Well, one example would be the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which seems to violate like most of our like experience day to day.
No.
Plenty of laws.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
well, I'm happy to hear it.
Heisenberg presented that model as a way of specifically showing how absurd quantum mechanic claims were at the time. It is not the uncertainty principle isn't an actual correct physical model.
Okay. Okay, so
and it's also
me. I mean,
and it is also 0% testimonial evidence. It is an analysis.
Well, yeah.
It is an analysis of physics models, not testimony. So we're going to need a different example for your thing where all we have to go on is testimony.
Well, I mean, as another example, or it could go back to the same one if you prefer. It seems to me that a lot of the things that we know about physics in general, like observations, for instance, of the Higgs boson particle, is data which is being reported by people. And it's not like we individually get to observe the experiments that go on in those rooms. All we have to go off is what the scientists say.
So we don't just know what the scientists say. We know the data, and we know that science operates with a foundation of not only testable, falsifiable claims, but on reproducibility. This isn't what we know about the Higgs boson isn't just because some scientists said so. It's because some scientists have run a test and presented that data for peer review from other scientists. The fact that you can't personally go out and verify it does not mean that there isn't robust evidence for you that goes beyond testimony.
By the way, there is a process by which you can go and verify it. You just have to enter the sciences. Science is open to everybody. But you're basically, Jack, this is the equivalent of, there's a funny episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Mac, who is the dopey young Earth creationist, makes the same claim that you have the same faith in the scientists as they have faith in the prophets. And it's one of the, I mean, it's just bringing in Heisenberg uncertainty principle and stuff certainly dresses it up to make it sound sexier, but it's the same very silly principle. because we do have things. And yes, you're not going to learn every science that you accept that scientists are doing science of. You are going to continue to see their fruits. And if you decide you want to pursue it, you can pursue it. But the trust in the prophets has yet to create a cell phone, and yet trust in the sciences has.
So we still need an example. Yeah. We still need an example of something where we are relying on testimonial evidence.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand the thing that Matt just laid out about how, like I understand reciprocity, like being able to reproduce experiments in a lab broadly. There are definitely things, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that all science is the same level of faith that we have in that. Like, as an example,
no science is a level of faith. Faith is the excuse people give when they don't have evidence. Science is presenting tentative conclusions that are wholly based in evidence.
Yeah, I understand what science is broadly. What I'm talking about are very specific things that can only maybe be observed once. If you remember in the Trent Horn debate, he brought up the crisis of reciprocity. Excuse me if I'm saying that wrong.
I don't know what word it is or what concept you're referencing. I also don't know what you're talking about with the Trent Horn debate. Can you present an example of this need for testimonial evidence that you think we're relying on? I don't give a fuck about Trent Horn.
The word you're looking for, by the way, is replicate, not reciprocity. That's has to do with reciprocation, not replication.
Apologies. I have.
Yeah, stop apologizing, man. If you do it one more time, my head's gonna explode. Just an example of something we rely day to day that we accept as true, even Matt and I as skeptics, that is purely testimonial.
Well, okay. If we can leave this, if you want to leave the science one, but another one would be
the failed one. Yes, let's leave the one that wasn't right. Sure, let's go to one that the way you said that was as though you were implying that you had successfully presented one, but you'll give us a new one. So you didn't.
To me, it didn't seem sufficient, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Very,
but I'm happy to move on.
Very wrong. Jack, I very, very wrong to the point that I'm ready to, I think I've deduced that you don't have much involvement with the sciences because you seem to also be wholly unaware of how they work. But I would like a testimonial based only thing we accept as true as skeptics or geez.
Well, what I was about to say was history, like a lot of the examples of things that have happened, 100 years ago.
History isn't a science, and the claims of history isn't science, and the claims of history aren't in the same category. If you tell me, for example, that if we have no reason to think that Jesus actually existed as a person, despite that, or we don't have good enough reason to confirm his existence. Despite that, I'm willing to accept that because there's nothing extraordinary that there was an itinerant Jewish rabbi in the first century. The extraordinary things about Jesus's purported existence are things like the miracles. And the only evidence that we have for those miracles are the anecdotes presented in the Bible. That is insufficient in the same way that saying you got a pet fire-breathing dragon is insufficient. So we're not relying on testimony to determine history. What we're doing is saying, hey, here's a fact that somebody reported once upon a time. What other sources do we have? And are those sources in competition? When we have a variety of primary sources that disagree on other things but agree on the thing in question, we then, historians, will reach the conclusion that for now, until such time as there's a disqualifier for it or a good reason to dismiss it, we will go ahead and presume that this is an accurate or a somewhat accurate representation of what happened then. But that's not saying testimony is sufficient to determine truth.
So basically the level of assurity you have for a historical claim is quantitatively different than the assurity you have.
Oh my God, the question you asked 10 minutes ago when we said yes.
Yes, and this all goes back to David Hume, who's famously said, the wise man proportions his confidence to the evidence. So you can have different degrees of confidence or different levels of confidence in a claim. I am highly confident that I exist. I'm pretty damn confident that Jimmy exists. I'm pretty confident that Jack exists. I'm not as confident that Jesus exists. I'm less confident that fairies and the Loch Ness Monster exist or could exist. I'm even less confident that magical beings outside of space and time exist. My confidence level in those things is proportional to the evidence.
Yeah, I know. That makes sense. I'm sorry if restating the premise made it sound like I didn't hear you the first time. I was just trying to recoup so I showed that I knew what you were talking about.
Because we've been at this for more than 15 minutes and made no progress, do you have an argument for the supernatural? Because I'd love to hear it.
Well, my argument was from basically a necessity to rely on testimonial evidence, and it seems we've reached an impasse in that regard. So,
cool.
I don't want to go over the same ground, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. So, if you guys, whatever you guys want.
I have a very quick, simple metaphor that I think might clear some things up on your historical thing too. If somebody comes to me and says, George Washington owned a red hat, and I say, cool. Great. I've not failed as a skeptic. If I then write a paper on the implications of George Washington and the future of the country, all upon the basis of the fact that he owned a red hat, now I have failed as a skeptic because I have affirmed a claim and I have staked the claim into the more extraordinary territory. So, or if you just take a different thing, he owned a red hat, fine. He owned a red dragon, as Matt said earlier. If I accept that, that's also failed skepticism. Even the weight of the acceptance of the fact changes according to the fact. When I say I accept he has a red hat, because what the fuck am I going to do? Spend my day figuring out if he owned a red hat or not? I don't care. But if whether or not I accept that he owns a red hat determines whether I will be tortured for eternity, now I'm going to want evidence of that red hat.
Yeah, this is where I was talking about. This is where I was talking about the impact of being wrong. What is if it turns out that the claim that I accept turns out to be false, what do I have to change about my worldview? That is one of the factors in determining what the risk is to assent. And so if somebody says, hey, George Washington had a red hat, whether he had a red hat or not doesn't seem to add much risk at all to, my life. I don't know how else to potentially phrase that.
Yeah, I do understand the example of the red hat. I remember a debate where you discussed George Washington having a dog named Piggy. I guess I would just say that it seems to me that there are historical claims that we have no more evidence for than George Washington having a red hat, which are significant and which we kind of have to take a position on with limited evidence. As an example.
Give an example.
Yes, exactly. Good example.
Yeah, I need an example because right now I'm not aware of any example that I have to accept something from history on evidence like that.
Well, as an example would be like Bronze Age battles. And the reason why I would say that is significant is because those sort of historical events shape how we understand the world today and specifically how people interact. That is why I would say that to me, it seems like it's hard to avoid taking positions on things you have limited evidence for, which are potentially very impactful to your worldview if you're accounting for history.
Jack, if whether or not we had Bronze Age battles impacts our life today, they impact our life today regardless of if I accept them or not.
True, but it's about having an educated perspective. You want to have as many.
Some people
you want to believe as many true things.
Some people don't give a fuck about world history. Some people are just woodworkers.
I still don't have an example. So I need a more concrete example to understand why you think that I have to accept things that I don't have evidence for. I think we have lots of decent evidence for Bronze Age battles.
You do? I mean, obviously for some, but not for all of them. As
Correct.
an example, that the Romans and the Carthaginians fought in the Aegean Sea. I'm not really sure there's a lot of boat remains we could go over, or even anything besides the texts, which are testimonial evidence.
I find it incredibly difficult to talk to you, Jack, because when I say that I think we have good evidence for Bronze Age battles, your reply is, for all of them? I think I found one where it doesn't work out. I didn't say for all of them. I didn't even imply for all of them. But are you suggesting, John, that we have no good evidence for any Bronze Age battles?
Oh, no, not at all.
No, not at all. And I wouldn't have fucking accused you of that had you not immediately gone to, what about this one? I think you're overlooking this one here where I don't have zero. I don't give a fuck. But I have zero reason. Okay, never mind. I have zero reason to continue this conversation.
Okay.
I apologize. I actually here I have a last.
Oh no, you fucking apologized again.
Oh man, did you already do it? I have a last question.
I'm really not trying to be.
What's the?
Okay,
stop.
You're not trying to be. You just are.
Right, but this sounds like an apology. You're ramping up too. So, Jack, what is the supernatural claim you believe we should accept on the same basis that because some Bronze Age battles happened, if somebody else says, "Oh, also there was another Bronze Age battle at this time in this place," and I just go, "Dope." So that's the standard. That's what I do. If somebody says that, I just go dope, and I probably don't even remember it. On that standard that you've established that we do, what supernatural claim do you believe we should apply the same standard to? Because the stakes are similarly low and the qualities of Bronze Age battles and the characteristics are established to have otherwise happened.
Well, I can't answer the question because I don't agree the standards are low. But if you're asking me just like broadly what, supernatural claims, I would say specifically supernatural claims that seem to come from trusted sources. Give one.
Just give one supernatural claim we should accept.
Wow.
Just one.
Supernatural. Literally, you just said supernatural claims that seem to come from trusted sources. You didn't state a claim. Instead, you stated a category of claim, which is an extremely stupid category of claim, because whether or not a source seems to be trustworthy doesn't mean that it is trustworthy. So what supernatural claim do you think we should accept because it comes from a seemingly trustworthy source?
I would say the general phenomena of apparitions throughout history. Not all of them, but enough of them that it is.
Okay, give one.
Not all of them. One. Not all of them. Just the ones that you think come from trusted sources. So you want to dismiss the ones that you don't think come from trusted sources. So give me one that has a really good trusted source for an apparition.
Only one. The bar is so low. One.
Okay. I suspect you'll have an answer to this, but I think Fatima is a good example.
You do?
Yeah, well, my understanding is
what's the trusted source? What's the trusted source?
The testimony of all the people who stood in the field and saw the apparition of Mary.
Why are they trusted?
Oh my God, I'm remembering when you called last time now.
The only time I've called on the show was on the hang up when I was annoying Hobbesian.
Oh, okay. There was another person who called in with the apparitions of Fatima and other Mary.
Why are they a trusted source? Have you interviewed them?
What'd you say?
Have you interviewed them?
No, I have not.
Do you have firsthand interviews that demonstrate these people to be trustworthy?
From what I read, yeah, I think I do.
From what I read, yeah. What? You read a story. You read a story, and you think the source is trusted. Why? That's what I'm asking.
Well, because it's been cited and reviewed. I looked through I asked for a specific example. I'm sorry, I don't have the text in front of me right now.
What has been reviewed? What has been reviewed, and by whom?
The testimony of the people there by third-party, non-Christian interviewers.
Who?
I'm sorry, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, Matt. I mean, I could try to find it on Google.
You're talking about the 3 kids, right?
There were kids, and then there was a later apparition of towards like I think it was like a couple hundred people in the field at Fatima, like at the end of it all.
Do you know the details of the thing you're trying to propose as a trustworthy apparition?
Not offhand, but I have read on it. And I, again, I'm
and
sorry.
You just went, this adds up.
What's up?
And
Cool.
You went, this adds up. So I'm just stoked, Jack, because I'm excited to tell you about all the witnesses to early miracles of Mormonism, all the witnesses to the Book of Mormon actually being made of plates, which was the number of witnesses who allegedly saw the golden plates that Joseph translated using the hat and stuff is more than the 3 kids. And then the subsequent crowds of people who saw the miracles is also more than the what you've reported to read. It's going to be wild, Jack, because why wouldn't you take them at their word and become a Mormon soon? And then when you're done with that, we're gonna do Islam
Jack has
after.
to be a Catholic. Jack has to be a Catholic.
I'm more of a broad Christian, but I was raised anyway.
No, Jack. No, Jack. Do you not understand the messages of Fatima, where she specifically instructed them to come on the 13th day and pray the rosary every day? That's necessarily a Catholic prayer.
Oh, I know. I know. Yes, I am aware.
So you just believe the apparitions are Catholic, but you're not,
right?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Sorry.
Cut out.
So you're a Catholic, right?
I'm a broad Christian, but if you want to put me in that box, that's fine.
Do you pray the rosary? Are you an active Catholic? Do you accept the positions of the Catholic Church?
Well, I have issues with the doctrine because the text doesn't seem to line up with some of the things the church teaches. So
how is it that you can believe Mary appeared and gave specific instructions to a group of reliable people and that this story is true, and yet you still don't pray the rosary and accept the Catholic Church?
No, I do pray the rosary, but I don't necessarily believe all
Then
the
why didn't you
church
fucking say that when I fucking asked you?
I'm sorry, you cut out. I misunderstood. I apologize.
Shit. All right. Hey, do you know how the Bronze Age got its name?
From the use of bronze for tools and weapons?
Or tools and weapons. So we have lots of bronze weapons, right?
Yeah.
You don't think those bronze weapons from the Bronze Age are sufficient evidence that Bronze Age battles took place?
Well, no more than if, someone took you to Mecca and they said, here's a pile of rocks. This was Muhammad's thing. It wouldn't prove that was Muhammad's rocks.
Let me try this again, because I don't believe you're this stupid. You don't think that the existence of Bronze Age weapons is sufficient physical evidence for the likelihood of Bronze Age use of those bronze weapons for battles?
Oh, it absolutely is sufficient evidence for that, but not for any specific.
Of course it is. Which is, see, what did you say at the last?
It seems like I don't understand how you can look at a Bronze
Age
weapon and
Never mind. I'm done with Jack.
I am
absolutely uncontroversially. No, Jack. I'm fucking done. Because your whole thing was that we have to rely, shut up. We have to rely on testimonial evidence. And we have to rely on testimonial evidence with regards to Bronze Age battles. No, we don't. We have Bronze Age weapons. That's what the fucking age is named after. The changes in metallurgy that led to Bronze Age weapons, which were used in Bronze Age battles. That doesn't mean that every claim of every battle was real, but clearly, as you pointed out, it is great empirical, non-testimonial evidence of Bronze Age battles.
Yeah, just not specific ones. That was my point.
You have no point. Yeah, there's Jesus Christ.
Okay, I won't say I'm sorry, but
All right,
I wish we
bro,
could've gotten
since
somewhere.
you weren't going to do your own heavy lifting, just so you know the details, it was 3 kids. There's no hundreds of people in the field who also saw her. What they saw was on October 13th, potentially up to 70,000 people reported seeing a solar phenomenon, which they associated with being the miracle promised by the Lady of Fatima to the 3 kids, and that miracle was the sun falling to the earth. And by the way, people use this story in courtrooms to show why eyewitness testimony cannot be always trusted, because 70,000 people apparently were willing to say the sun fell to the earth. So is that still the one you thought we should accept because it's reliable? Or do you think so you do believe that in 1917 the sun fell to the earth? Do you also not understand how the sun fundamentally works?
It wouldn't surprise me at all if God can make an apparition that the sun falls to the earth to 70,000
So now
people.
we've already jumped
It wouldn't
way past
surprise me at all that Jack
supernatural.
will believe anything if he thinks it comes from fucking God.
Right. So God also wanted to trick these 70,000 people into thinking the sun could fall to the earth and make sure they also fundamentally wouldn't understand how things work. And by the way, only they saw it. Nobody else in 1917 on October 13th. No one else in the entire world.
God gave an apparition to these people in a field that they understood to be the sun falling to the earth, which is impossible. And nobody else noticed it. So you now believe that there's a prankster God that intentionally deceived thousands of people as evidence that this God exists? Do you know how stupid that is?
By the way, we don't have 70,000 accounts of it. We have accounts that 70,000 people saw it, not 70,000 accounts.
What kind of fucking dickhead God? What kind of dickhead God do you believe in that is intentionally sending deceptive apparitions to people?
Well, Matt, I mean, I've read the Bible the same as you.
I doubt that.
Knowing the position, like the actions God takes in the Old Testament from the book of Job on, it's not that surprising to me that he would do something that looked, like that to 70,000 people. Old Testament is full of that sort of stuff.
I know something else that's full of that sort of stuff.
Was laid out about.
You're full of it.
Okay.
Hey, how do you explain the photographers that were present for the miracle because it had been forecasted something would be there, who didn't get a picture of the sun, which had appeared to adapt to a disc, began spinning like a disc, not an orb, but like a disc, then was zigzagging when it careened to the earth, then zigzagged back to its position? What do you make of the fact that we have 0 photos despite the fact there were photographers present?
Well, that makes perfect sense to me because it didn't appear to anyone else on Earth. It was to
they
show
were present
people in that...
at the miracle.
Yeah.
They were present. So what you're saying is God used a special projector, because he didn't do it to the actual sun, otherwise the rest of the earth would have seen, used a special projector to make it look like that's what happened, but specifically did it in a way that cameras couldn't pick up.
Yeah, because
so why is your God willing to give 70,000 people that evidence, but not the rest of the world?
Well, I mean, same reason divine hiddenness is a problem generally. It
because
exists.
It's stupid. Because it's a thing that you do that you get stupid people to fall for. The
divine
miracles.
Divine hiddenness is an argument against God. It is not more evidence for a God. Every time we point out a problem, you don't ever get to talk to me about skepticism ever, Jack. You don't understand it at all. But every time we point out a problem, you're like, well, that makes perfect sense because God's a dick, or God would do this, or God did this in Job, or God would intentionally hide it from the camera because I believe in a stupid prankster God that's going to demonstrate his fucking existence while absolutely doing nothing that would demonstrate his existence to anybody who's not a clueless buffoon who doesn't understand evidence.
What do you make of all the people who were there as believers who had been promised the miracle, who were there next to the people who were believers and saw the miracle, but they didn't see it?
That's news to me.
Well, the whole thing seems to be news to you because you couldn't even give me the basic details at the beginning. I had to go look it up to refresh my memory.
We pulled this up. We pulled this up because neither of us have this memorized, even though we both talked about it half a dozen times or more.
Yeah.
We had to go look it up. Why couldn't you look it up?
Well, because I didn't know we would go down the specific road beforehand.
Why do we have to do all the work to look up and explain your fucking argument to you?
Jack, you called in and told them you wanted to present an argument for the supernatural, and you're saying that it surprised you we asked for one example, and the one that you gave you needed to have ready to investigate?
Well, my argument that I was trying to make at the beginning was in regards to claims which seem to be based purely on testimonial evidence to me from science. That was the direction I assumed the conversation would go. It didn't go that way, so I wasn't prepared for a different debate.
You weren't prepared to give an example, and again, even the example you did give, there are testimonies of the people present who said it did happen, who were literally staring into the sun. That's one of the explanations is people were told to stare into the sun and may have had their eyes fucked up by that, and then saw stuff, and now we've conglomerated all the different stories of what that eye damage looked like into the disc falling. But literally, you want us to go with, on the basis of your testimony thing, one of the things you've accepted is something where thousands of people gathered to witness a miracle, some of which say, even though they were believers, it didn't happen, and some that say it did. But that's one you've accepted. Wild, buddy.
Well, yeah, Jimmy, it's news to me that there were a lot of people there who didn't see it. My understanding was everyone saw it, or
nope.
For the most, so
yeah. Next time you should actually read the example. And this is the thing: when you hear something that extraordinary, and I feel like we're just looping back to the very beginning. So this is, I think, going to be the final thought, unless Matt has something. If something that extraordinary comes across your desk and you don't find those details, you did fail as a skeptic if you accepted it as true. If you hear something like the disc falling out of the sky, thank you. If you hear something like the disc falling out of the sky and you accept it on this basis of not reading very deeply, and you don't literally look for, in the way science often works, the things that disqualify it, that disprove it, you have failed as a skeptic. And it really just sounds like you read a headline, but not on Snopes, and just accepted it. Matt, do you have anything left for Jack?
No.
Jack, call back with an example that you feel thoroughly ready to defend.
I will try. Thank you, Jimmy.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye, Jack. Bruv.
It's so hard because, like, last night was actually awesome and gave me hope for humanity. Yeah. I know I already talked about this. I don't just want to harp on the fucking debate I did last night, but I spent almost the bulk of the last 20 years taking live calls and interacting with people from all different walks of life, all different levels of understanding. And sometimes, it's fairly straightforward. And I think I have iced tea arriving, perhaps. Thank you, Sri. Sometimes it's really straightforward. Yeah, I was dying.
I'm on an Arnold Palmer kick lately.
Oh, God, no.
Just addicted to them.
I hate you don't put anything in my iced tea ever. No sugar, no nothing. Anyway, it is frustrating to sit here, and all I want is to get clarity on what someone's saying.
Yeah.
And then when I ask, hey, do you have an example? Do you understand that? And then we get like nothing. Somebody's like, oh, well, I think that the Bronze Age weapons, that are the reason the Bronze Age was named, I think that's good evidence that there were battles, but it doesn't confirm any specific battle. I never said it did. It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
The logical fallacies that they want to imply that I've made when they don't understand logical fallacies in the first place. I didn't say that the existence of a Bronze Age weapons proves Bronze Age Battle A or A23. That's not the case. But to say there were Bronze Age weapons, metallurgy took a turn. We named an entire era from like 3300 to 1200 BC or so because of this, and that there's no reason to accept that a battle occurred other than testimony. No. When one group of people who don't occupy an area wind up occupying an area, and the people who were previously there are displaced and weaponless, I would say that change in regime supports claims that there was probably a battle. And that if 3 kids think, first of all, everything about Fatima is 100% Catholic. There is no way to accept the sighting there and wind up a Protestant.
Yeah.
Because what appeared was the Virgin Mary, who from Protestant perspective is not special and not revered as a saint the way she is in Catholicism. As a matter of fact, I was brought up with Catholics being a cult who deified Mary and other saints that we did not. Now, you can't have the Virgin Mary show up to 3 little girls saying, come back and I'll show you something cool. Come back and I'll show you something cool. And then 70,000 people show up and they all witness, or some of them witness, the sun falling to the earth, but nobody can photograph it. There's no empirical evidence outside of this, and no way to confirm how many people were there, who was there, or what they saw. It's all just stories on top of stories. And curiously, this happens a century ago, but not now. If God's going to reveal himself in so much of a robust way to 70,000 people in 1916, 1917, whatever the hell it was, why doesn't he do it now? Where is the revelation that takes place today that can be live streamed on every channel on the internet and simultaneously affirmed by every person that exists on this planet to have all witnessed clearly the same thing? Why doesn't that happen? Why is it that these miracles that you find people like Jack are like, oh, I find the testimony incredibly reliable? Why do these miracles decline as our ability to test and investigate them increases? God makes it so we can't photograph them. Well, now that we can photograph everything all the time with our phones and everything else, that explains why there's no miracles. God doesn't want to do stuff because then we would say, I saw it happen, but my camera just didn't pick it up. And then we would be able to prove that God's doing something that we can't photograph. This is beyond stupid. It is 100% special pleading that begins with, I believe there's a God who can do anything, but he's got to be cagey.
Yeah.
And he's definitely Catholic, even though he might not be.
I mean, even in that scenario where there were photographers at the Fatima event who did not photograph that means you are saying the magical event that happened wasn't actually that the sun fell out of the sky, which is the miracle they all report. The miracle is God made that many people hallucinate. Because to make the camera fail would mean that the photons that the eyes were taking in, the light that was entering your eyes to make the image as they were reporting what was happening, that wasn't actually happening, that there was no physical representation in the world itself, that this is purely hallucination. Congratulations, you've just downgraded your miracle to a group hallucination. That's never been done in a charismatic religious event ever. Blowing my mind. Got a preference on next call? Go ahead.
No, I was I hit my my sad trombone button, and then I realized that I didn't have the other ones labeled. I had to actually look it up because when I want to do a sad trombone, it would suck if I actually went to like the spooky one or something instead.
If you ever decide to upgrade, it actually says on the little screen what each one is. So I know when I want to do it, it's this one, but I don't think I have this set for you all to hear. Oh, no, maybe I do. Did you hear that?
I did not. The reason I don't have that screen up on here is because I have the meters up on the screen.
Mine has both.
To it. Yeah, you have a better setup than I do. Anyway, let's get on to some theists, because this one I'm even less optimistic about. So John in California, pronouns are he, him, wants to talk about the power of God to physically manifest in the world. So, hi, John.
Hi, Matt. Good to talk to you again.
I doubt it, but I'm in favor.
No, I like you. Don't say that. That's not true. I just didn't know I've never respected authority.
It has nothing to do with whether it has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with whether or not you like me. It has to do with whether or not we're likely to have a productive conversation at all. So today you're calling about the powers of God physically manifesting in the world. Are you here to make a case that happens?
Yeah, and I was going to use a specific example, like how God's order is revealed in the world and how it's something that you can follow, and if you don't, you kind of get fucked up. And why it's kind of like why it feels like a personality. I don't know what that means. But anyway,
I don't need the preamble, but I don't need the preamble. But what you're saying is, God physically manifests in the world. Give me an example of a manifestation and how we know it's God.
Okay. So once I was in the desert in Mexico, I was in like a really kind of a bad place. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm like ginger, and I had long ginger dreads at the time. And I was walking down the road, kind of scraggly, and I had this voice in my head telling me, get off the road. And I really didn't want to go off and walk in the grass because I was afraid of snakes. And, all of a sudden a car goes by and a bottle is thrown out of the window, hits me right on the sternum, like just underneath my neck. And if it was, a couple inches higher, there's a good chance that would have gone well, because your neck's not the strongest part to have a lot of weight on it. And like when that happened, immediately the voice boomed, get off the road. Snakes are more dangerous. The snakes and people are more dangerous than the snakes of the world. You're an idiot. And I listened to it. I started walking in the grass. And then after this was all said and done, I crossed over the Rio Grande, and I was in kind of a safe spot, and I stepped on the head of a little, like, small copperhead. And it's harmless, and, like, I just laughed at the irony from the universe, I guess. I don't know. And that's kind of one example. So, like, the voice that was revealing the way the world was structured to me, that, like, I was in communication with, it wasn't me, because, like, I was disagreeing with it, was right, and then that same order manifested in the patterns of the world in that situation. That's like kind of one specific example.
Okay. So what I asked for was an example of God physically manifesting in the world and how you knew it was God. And what I got was, you heard a voice in your head that said, get off the road. And then when you got hit by a bottle that was flung from a car, you heard the voice again telling you that the snakes of people are more dangerous than the snakes of nature.
It said the worst snakes are in people, you idiot. Get off the road. Is what it actually said.
Okay. So you think that God called you an idiot, and
yes,
that God wanted you to get off the road so that you could step on a copperhead and not get a bottle thrown at you?
Sorry, did I say copperhead? It was a gardener snake. I didn't say copperhead. It was a gardener snake, which are very harmless.
So first of all, you said copperhead, and second of all, there's no such thing as a gardener snake. It's garter.
Garter.
Garter. Garter. But yes, you said copperhead. Let's skip all that.
Sorry.
My brother
got bit by a copperhead once.
Apart from the fact that God also seems to think you're an idiot, what evidence do you have that this was God?
I mean, it was the order of the universe revealing itself to me, and it's matched up with the universe.
No, John.
Oh my God.
When I say what is the evidence for something, you don't just get to assert it was the order of the universe revealing itself to me. What evidence do you have that this voice that you heard in your head was God?
Well, I would think about it this way. Like, if I roll a ball of clay down a hill, it starts getting all weird impressions, and eventually on a long enough trip, it'll become a perfect sphere, because that's the perfect shape to roll down the hill. And my consciousness is shaped in the same way by evolution, where the reason why I was in that situation in the first place is because, like, I had a
Goodbye,
call.
John. Don't ever call me again.
John, this is a fake call.
No, I hung up.
Right?
I hung up.
That's not real.
I've taken too many calls from John. I do not believe you. I do not believe that John is for real. I do not believe that John is a serious thinker. I do not believe that John will ever have an actual claim. I'm completely convinced that John is nothing but a fucking time waster. Let me tell you a story that probably didn't happen, and I heard a voice in my head. Okay, what evidence do you have that the voice was God? Well, it was the universe manifesting. No. What evidence do you have? Well, I like to think of it as if I roll a ball of clay down a hill, it'll end up as perfect sphere. No, it fucking won't, because a perfect sphere can't exist in nature. Well, that's the most efficient shape to roll down a hill. No, it's not. It depends on the hill. You are wrong. You are fractally wrong, John. Fractal wrongness. Fractal wrongness is the state of being wrong at every conceivable resolution. John cannot be serious, but he almost convinced me, because I think John's an idiot, and because God evidently also thinks John is an idiot. That was some of the best evidence for God I've ever heard, and yet it still wasn't enough.
It was the order of the universe revealing itself. The order of the universe that you were saying was that, one, fundamentally, it's dangerous to walk on a road for cars, and two, snakes usually are on not the road but in the grass and on the ground. That is something you weren't internally capable of. Even if you are hearing a voice, that can't come from your own head. And if it is a voice in your own head, the voice in your head also thinks you're an idiot.
Meanwhile,
how is the peyote?
I'm not sure yet. Okay, never mind. I stand corrected. I was going to say, I'm not sure that garter snakes are native to New Mexico in the Rio Grande area, but there is a species of garter snake that does exist in that area. So
fair enough.
That could have been cool. But I don't think there's a copperhead, so it's a good thing that part of the story wasn't true.
I'm curious about what I'm being forgiven for. Do you see line 5? You good with that one?
What? Oh, okay. It's 17.
Line 17, shortcut 5. Yeah.
Well, let's take it. Let's find out. Andrew in Florida's a theist, pronouns are he, him, wants to tell Jimmy that he forgives him and can answer Matt's question to Shafiq. Okay.
Did something happen that I asked you to forgive me for, or are you assuming I'd like your forgiveness?
I'm assuming that you need my forgiveness.
Oh, okay. Well,
what?
For what?
Jimmy told me to fuck off one call.
Oh, hey,
So
Andrew,
God forgives you.
Andrew, fuck off.
Wait, Andrew, you're saying that God forgives Jimmy? I thought you were calling to say you forgive Jimmy.
No, I'm saying I forgive him and God forgives him.
How do you know God forgives him?
Because I think Jimmy is sincere. I think he's a sincere and genuine atheist.
That's not what I asked. Why do you think God forgives Jimmy?
For telling you to fuck off, I believe is the exact thing.
I think God is a forgiving and merciful God. According to how do I know that God is actually forgiving? He's a forgiving and merciful God.
How do you know that?
Also, fuck off.
The Sacred Heart of Jesus apparition. I'm actually a Catholic, so.
Okay, so what is required? What is, according to Catholicism, does God just forgive everybody of everything all the time?
No.
No. So what is required in Catholicism for God to forgive Jimmy?
That's a good point.
Yeah. According to Vatican II, the Sacred Ecumenical Council, God forgives people who, by no fault of their own, do not have access to the truth, who are not denying it out of deliberate, willful sinning, and if they're good-hearted and genuine, that they can go to heaven through purgatory first. So I think you guys will be forgiven in the end, just through purgatory.
So he hasn't forgiven me
According
yet.
to Vatican II.
Wait. So he hasn't forgiven me yet. He'll forgive me in the end.
I'm not sure how that part works, but
right. Will he forgive me for asking? God's all powerful, right?
Yes.
Can his tongue reach my prostate? I'm just adding things for him to forgive me for because I don't care about this call at all. Does he have that power?
He could if he wanted to. Yes, he could if he wanted to.
Thanks, Andrew. Hey, Andrew. We have plenty of other calls, so I'm going to let you propose what you'd like to call and make a... Did you hang up on him?
He hung up.
I wasn't going to hang up. I was going to say, propose what topic you'd like.
We didn't get to the thing. So, Andrew, you're wrong. So, first of all, even with your own fucking example of what Vatican II Electric Boogaloo has to say about God forgiving people, Jimmy doesn't qualify for that because Jimmy is not at all repentant for telling you to fuck off. Jimmy is also still absolutely living in sin and plans to continue living in sin based on what Vatican II Electric fucking Boogaloo says about sin. So when you call in to say that you forgive him and that God forgives him, you're wrong. By your own religion, God has not yet forgiven Jimmy and may never forgive Jimmy unless Jimmy actually repents, adopts Catholicism, and turns. And then also in Catholicism, he would need to go sit in a little booth with a priest to get instructions for what he must be do to absolve his sins. So Andrew doesn't understand Catholicism, and he definitely doesn't understand Jimmy.
But I'll give him props for this. He acknowledged that God is powerful enough to, with his tongue, reach my prostate, which, phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's all I'll be thinking about the rest of the show. Well, that was a fun one. You can pick the next.
Donald is a theist in New York, pronouns are he, him, who says he's a pantheist and has a thing about Jesus. So, hey, Donald, what's going on?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good Lord.
That was ominous.
Sounds like you're about to tell me a mission and then I have to destroy this message at the end.
Where's that ominous? Yeah, my question, very simple.
Okay.
In the Bible, Jesus never proclaimed himself as the Son of God, but many times as the Son of Man. So explain, please.
According to the Bible, did Jesus say before Abraham was, I am?
Yeah, I am. I like that.
Yeah. And also, was he killed for putting himself co-equal with God?
Maybe.
And in John 5:18, did he call God his own father?
Possible, but it's many times he called himself the Son of Man. That's my question.
Yes. Do you know what the Son of Man means? Do you know what the Son of Man means?
Humankind. That's what it means.
No.
Okay,
no.
Matt, tell me.
So the Son of Man is specifically used with Jesus to be both divine and man. It's one of the reasons people come up with this nonsense that he was fully God and fully man. He is the Son of God in the story because he is the actual offspring of God or God incarnate. He is the Son of Man because he is the son of Mary, come down through David all the way down through a lineage. That he needed to be the Son of Man in order for his death to absolve man of his sins. So, so basically, you're a theist. So basically, you're a theist. Wow, can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? I'm like fucking Ross Perot here. So Jesus, in the Bible, does refer to himself in ways that identify him both as the Son of Man, as the Son of God, and as co-equal to God. But you don't seem to know any of this, but you called into a show to say that Jesus never proclaimed himself as the Son of God. So despite the fact that you don't know what you're talking about, you called into a show to pretend you did.
Okay, I know one thing. The universe, and that's all there is.
How do you know that? How do you know there's not a multiverse?
Well, that too.
You just said the universe, and that's all there is, Donald. So you can't say there's only a universe, and there... Okay, bye, Dick.
Hey, no.
What a waste.
Fuck off.
What a waste.
And I'm not asking you for forgiveness for telling you to fuck off either.
I'm about to start offering money to any real theist that wants to call in and have a decent discussion to defend what they actually believe. If you're an atheist, by the way, I'm getting ready to do a bunch of videos for my personal channel. And apart from one of them being a debate review, the rest of them are about calling out stupid atheists. I get irritated with John and other theists or potential theists who call in. But I get even more irritated with stupid atheists who want to pretend like they have some understanding of the Bible when they don't. They've never bothered to study it. They don't know it. And so they make really bad arguments against Christianity. I don't want there to be bad arguments. And I don't like the fact that you guys are putting me in a position where I have to put on my Jesus hat and defend it. That's pretty stupid. But also there's other atheists running around claiming theism is falsifiable. No, it's fucking not. I could falsify theism by falsing every god within it. No, that is you presuming that all of those gods are falsifiable. That video is coming. There's a bunch of other videos coming. I've spent this time desperately trying to educate people on the things that I know while I continue to learn. I'm an obsessive learner. I spent most of the week learning a handful of different topics specifically related to Islam. And yesterday's debate, I only got maybe 2 hours of study in to specifically address Sufism, and made fewer mistakes in that than any caller today has on any point related to any religion or skepticism or the supernatural. I'm not that exceptional. I don't understand the people who won't do the work.
I don't even care if the last caller was real or not. The laughter thing at the... Yeah, I just...
Let's try it again.
All I know is the universe, and that's all there is.
Hey, this is probably pretty relevant here. From Pennsylvania, we have a theist, pronouns are he, him, whose name is Issa, and it may be Issa from last night, who has a question about a deity. So, Issa, you're on the Sunday show.
It is me. How are you doing?
How you doing? I'm doing well.
A pleasure. I think we had a
Thank
really
you for
good
not making me
conversation
pay.
last night.
Yeah, thank you for not making me pay for a theist that is reasonable to call in. So, welcome. The floor is yours.
So, kind of like going in the engagement of the conversation last night, I was kind of interested in kind of like a question to exploring this. What about looking at God as sort of like an archetype? You know, like, you know how we look at mythology and seeing kind of God as an archetype for people as opposed to like this literalistic, personalized being, sort of like, I would say sort of like in deism, it's the same kind of concept that you have this being that sort of it's not exactly literal, but it's like kind of a placeholder. How would you view that?
Maintaining that into adulthood and pretending like it exists, how would we view the maintaining of that as an archetype?
And kind of like accepting that for folks.
It would seem to me, maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but I think if I'm understanding it right, I would feel as though that is as insulting as suggesting people should continue to believe in Santa as an adult. Because it's useful. They'll be good because Santa's watching. Am I misunderstanding the question?
Kind of the thing that not exact. It's sort of there. It's the kind of thing that I'm looking into is this, because I'm interested in like a pluralistic model of how we engage because you have people with very different kinds of beliefs.
Sorry,
and we're
Issa,
trying to all live together.
you believe a God exists. So are you asking if you're wrong and a God doesn't exist, would it be useful to maintain as though he exists for some people? And if that is the case, do we tell them he actually exists, or do we tell him he's a Santa-like figure that they should pretend exists?
It's a good question. I think what I'm asking, what I'm trying to get at, the brass tacks of where I'm trying to get at is we're living in this world where people have very differing views. And there are people who hold to this type of ideology that they believe that this God is real and it's very important and is kind of it's their pillar of their life. It's the most meaningful thing for them. My question kind of is, if we're using like a secular humanistic view, is there a way to kind of incorporate that? I'm kind of asking a pragmatic question.
Not with specific religions. I can't improve Islam from secular humanism for those people who say I don't want to let go of Allah, because Islam prohibits such adaptations from happening. It sounds like, based on just what I've heard so far, Matt's favorite thing about you might be that you're not a typical Muslim. But no,
I had lots of favorite things potentially. I think let me take a stab at this.
Sure.
I have no problem with stories, like for example, Aesop's fables. These sorts of things that create morality plays that teach a lesson. About crying wolf, for example. There's a good lesson to be taught there, and there's a story, and there's absolutely no need to think that the story ever actually happened to get value from it. The problem is if someone were to say, hey, I believe that that story actually happened, and that individual, the rest of the story, after it was eaten by the wolf, is that the dude that comes along with an axe and cuts the wolf open to rescue him, when they went on to teach a number of other things, and these other things that they say are also just as valuable as the don't cry wolf thing. I don't necessarily need a story to get the lesson, but the story's fine, however you want to teach the lesson. But if the story is being propped up both as a metaphorical lesson and as true by two different groups, then I think the ones that are propping it up as a metaphorical lesson are doing more to prop up the ones that are advocating it as truth than they are those that are just accepting it as a story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I feel that. I just think that's kind of my goal. I think even just with religions in general, is how do we kind of shift to a more metaphorical, archetypal view as opposed to a literalistic view? I think literalism is extremely dangerous and problematic for society. So that's kind of the initiative that I think is important.
But Issa, which one do you believe in? A metaphorical God or a literal God?
I would say I would not believe in a quote unquote personal God. That does not.
That's fine. But do you believe in like a deistic? You believe in a literal? The thing is, at the end of this, I've seen this come up recently because I was posting shorts, and somebody who had called in about the different colonizer religions versus, this was back when Matt did an episode with David Tamayo, colonizers' religion, and that those are the ones we should reject on the basis of it being from colonizers, but the other religions, and then the thing that just comes up is like, first and foremost, if you have enough faith in yourself as a human, sorry for the use of the word faith, but enough confidence in yourself as a human to think that you should hear what the truth is, it should matter just what the truth is. So yes, keeping metaphors, keeping stories, all of that kind of stuff. But if you're saying you want to advocate for a metaphorical God, do you want to advocate for a metaphorical God that other people are taking literally, as you acknowledge it as a metaphor? And if so, shouldn't we still identify whether or not we literally believe there is a God before engaging a metaphor?
I think
I have another
question.
example.
Last question.
Go on.
Yeah, the last. Oh, sorry.
Go. Save that for just a second, Issa, and I'll let you get to it. I have another example that might also make this clear. Crap, I lost it. Never mind. Go ahead.
I think that those are really good questions. I think literalism is always dangerous. I think that's where we get all the killing, all the wars. I think a lot of religion as a cultural medium, I don't think is a bad thing. I think it can be quite positive if it's not hurting anyone else.
I think you mean like religious fundamentalism. Literalism in and of itself isn't dangerous or not. It's not moral or amoral. It's not dangerous or adangerous. And so there are things which are literal, and acknowledging that there are things which are literal isn't dangerous. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with you is I'm just saying, whether or not we keep stories and engage in metaphor so that we can frame things in a way that are culturally, I don't think we need to as much as maybe you're suggesting, but that are culturally relevant and make easier metaphors, should still only be done with a foundation of a literal establishment. Are you actually saying there is or isn't a literal God? Whether there is a God is a yes or no question. Now, you might say you're not answering either of those, and that's
yes
what
or no,
Matt's
or
and
I
I
don't
do.
know.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. You can have the or. It's a yes or no question.
So what I would say for that particular point is we don't really know if God is real or not. Like that, it's for most people, it's just faith. Like you have a feeling of it or not. And I say for me personally, I'm open. I'm open to this concept, but it's not like it has to be. I'm not stuck in that particular space.
But how do we, Issa, how do we start a person there and say, whether then you accept that God literally exists or not will be a matter of faith and compelled feeling? How do we say that's okay? And then when they take it a step beyond that and go, ooh, you know what? I'm getting that same feeling from that God again, but this is telling me to kill homosexuals. How do we say that feeling and that faith thing that you did was acceptable at first? And by the way, I'm not surprised I'm doing this with you, Issa, because I do this with progressive Christians all the time. How do we say faith is foundationally okay and a personal choice in one zone, but not in others?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question.
It's why I don't believe in progressive religion and why I think progressive religion still has harm in it, even though it's better.
I remembered my example.
Oh, please go ahead.
First of all, and Issa, while we don't know each other very well, I trust that you won't remotely take this as an insult or praise or anything about where you're going. I think you might be the first atheist Muslim I've ever met, but because you're basically saying that you are not convinced that there's a personal God, and being not convinced would make you an atheist of some sort. Let me take this away from metaphor and fable, because I had another conversation or 2 or 3 conversations recently with some atheists about my take on skeptics using tarot cards and astrology for fun. There are secularists who are skeptics who don't believe that the cards themselves have any power to tell the future and don't believe that the stars govern our lives in any way. And yet they have fun with these because some of them use tarot cards to prompt personal reflection. Let's deal out a random set of cards and tell myself a little story because it gets me off on a trail where I can think about things, and it prompts me in ways that I'm not going to be prompted without a random thing. Or let me engage in an astrology thing, because sometimes astrology tells a story that I might find some value in. And on 2 different occasions, so I'm not talking about one person, 2 different occasions in the last couple of weeks, I was asked about this. I am vehemently opposed to both tarot and astrology. I despise both of them because they have both been used and are still being used to lie to people, to manipulate people, to bilk people out of their money. And while I understand that someone can find some use or value in them, I don't understand why that needs to be a tarot card. Why couldn't I deal from this deck of bicycle cards, and whatever 3 random cards I get there, have those numbers spin off into something else? Why couldn't I roll 3 Yahtzee dice, or 3 poker dice, or any number of things? Why couldn't I flip open a book and read the first word on 6 different pages, jot those down on a page, and see where that free floating expression, or where that takes my mind? Because all of those things I can do without propping up a system that has been harmful to the world and is clearly a lie. And so I have a very similar take when it comes to, hey, like, for example, Bob Price, who I've interviewed, but we're not going to get along because he's a Trumper. Bob Price, despite being an atheist, likes going to church. He likes the songs and the pageantry and the stories. It is his fan fiction. They're his comic books. He took the mythological storytelling and the pinnacle Superman, and applies that to Christ. And he's written all kinds of books about this, about, he's a mythicist. Yeah, he's also a racist, or has said racist things. In any case, he's using those stories in the same way that I watch Marvel movies. And I'm like, why the fuck would I ever waste time going to a church, propping up that industry that other people believe is literal and believe is true, when I could take that same money, watch a Marvel movie, buy a comic, read a good secular book, randomly put. I have here on my desk, I haven't had a chance to go through it yet. This is a printed copy of the Voynich manuscript, which nobody's ever decoded, and it may not even be decodable. It may just be gibberish. But it's such a cool thing. But if it were actually part of some religion actively now, I would not find it as cool. And so when you ask about, hey, what's the potential risk of, or would there be a problem with leaving room for God as a metaphor? I don't have any problem with there being metaphors about some God, but I don't think Islam or Christianity or Hinduism or any of the religions that are actively practiced by billions of people around the world, I don't think those make for good metaphor, because I don't think the number of people who are just taking them as, let me find a good idea in here and throw out all the bad ideas, I don't think those people are likely to ever outweigh the number of people who think it's literal truth.
Not to mention those specific religions, Islam and Christianity would consider using them as metaphor to promote secular humanism as a type of holy war. That would not be acceptable to those who believe.
Yeah, I hope that made sense. And by the way, Issa, the floor is yours again.
Yeah, go for it, bud.
It's cool. No, I'm listening. I think you made some interesting points. I've been to a lot of New Age psychic festivals, so I kind of had that as a part of my life too, going to psychic, and I've had a psychic reading, and it was literally just like that. I'm like, this is fun. I don't know if it's really real. The person said I'm this amazing person that's going to change the world. But I'm like, oh, that's cute. I have it recorded on a CD. I'm like, it was kind of like, you kind of go to the carnival and, you go to Zoltan and you put $1 in and they give you some kind of fortune. I kind of viewed it that way. I never really viewed it as being literal. And I was like, this is a fun kind of thing. And I think
sounds like going to a nutritionist though, because they said you have the ideal body type. And if I go into a nutritionist and they say I have the ideal body type, I'm leaving. I'm not sticking around and going, this is so cool.
I get that. Yeah, but it's different. Yeah, I would say like the nutritionist, I'm actually trying to get health. I would never go to a psychic to like get guidance. But it was interesting because
I'm glad you
followed.
Wouldn't. Others would, and others do.
I hear you. That's fair. That's totally fair. I watched the amazing James Randi when he revealed Peter Popov and Uri Geller, and he was talking about cold calling and mentalism, and it was really interesting because when I went to the psychic festival, I noticed all of those things. I noticed the cold calling, the warm calling. I noticed all the tactics, and I was like, wow, it's all there. Like the psychic stuff, it's really true. There's these gimmicks that work, and it really makes it seem like it's like a perfect mentalist technique where you really believe that it's like true, and then you listen to it and you're like, whoa, there's lots of tactics being used here to get people. And
just so you know, he said it's cold reading. Cold calling is a different type of scam. It's that's something salesmen use. And that just has literally just making phone calls. Cold reading is what you were talking about for psychics.
Cold reading. Sorry, did I say cold calling? Cold reading. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Cold reading.
I just assume you work at Verizon or something.
Yeah, not cold calling. I meant cold reading. That's what I meant. The warm reading and cold reading. That's what I was referring to.
It's all good.
Thanks for that. But it was like, it's an interesting thing. Like, what is the danger if people do have these beliefs? And I think the reason why I kind of care, and even with things like Islam, most of the world are Christians and Muslims. So how do you get folks to be in a more positive way if we don't have more of a progressive ideology? I heard that point about, progressive, but a lot of people, they're not going to give up these beliefs. So how do you shift folks into becoming more like this, where people are accepting? You have no idea. I'm around people who hate LGBTQIA+. I do diversity, equity, inclusion. That's the work that's the space that I am in. And I'm in a lot of places where people hate the queer community. They hate, they get like upset about abortions, all of these types of things. And I'm just like, whoa, it's like, it's overwhelming.
Issa, having the progressive alternative isn't actually what deconstructs people. It's just the step they take out. And I come from a radical religion such as that shares many of the sentiments you're describing. Yeah, I was Mormon. And so it's, while yes, I put myself in more progressive, I guess you could say religiously progressive phases after, my actual deconstruction was the challenges to the actual beliefs being debunked and me having to come to that. So it's the progressive option isn't what actually makes they don't transition and deconstruct through the progressive option. They deconstruct. Well, this isn't the right phrasing. They address the things that are wrong. And then as they try, the whole going to a progressive thing before you just leave is usually more to like make the people around you comfortable who you're trying to not lose as friends. That's more often the function of that, of like, I'm not saying I'm an atheist. I'm just a different kind of Mormon now, or at least I'm still a type of Christian or whatever. In fact, I was still pretty conservative, and then I dropped off into libertarianism before I became the cold-hearted socialist you know and love today.
Well, I think we need to have libertarianism in reforming republicanism. You have to have like the push towards libertarianism, because like that's the only way we're going to get social policies done. I think pushing things more towards the left is useful.
Yeah, well, that's a topic for a different time.
Oh, it's another conversation, but I think if we can get to that direction, it would be very helpful instead of getting out of these like really like, I don't know if you saw the Republican debates, but they were like insane.
Yeah, they're not
the guy brought up God. He was like, Mike Pence is like, God is here. I'm like, dude, you're supposed to be like running for office, man. Why are you talking about God?
I'd be stoked if Republicans were actually for small government and that was their thing, but they just aren't. Matt, I think you were trying to say something.
Yeah. I lost it. I'll have to come back to it again.
So good. I was gonna move on though, is the only thing. Unless he had more.
I just think, I really dig this discussion. I think it's important. I think we're all in agreement into the degree of getting people to be more progressive. And I understand the point of that you don't necessarily want religion in there, but I definitely think if we can get folks out of like really hurtful, hateful beliefs, I think that would be a benefit to all of us as humans.
Yeah, I remember the point, and this is an area where I think Issa's heart's in the right place, which is, hey, not everybody's likely to become an atheist. So how do we reform Islam? How do we reform Christianity? How do we reform all these to make them more progressive? And generally, my answer is that while you can do something like that a little bit, I think you're being overly pessimistic about how many people are likely to embrace atheism or secularism, and how many people might find progressive values. I was a full-on Rush Limbaugh ditto head for a number of years. Definitely had bigoted views, although not the worst at all. And what I think the key is, which is why I've been pushing down this particular road for the past 2 decades, is that I generally think people give lip service to caring about the truth. I think that we can demonstrate that the truth matters, and that the truth is it's in everybody's best interest to have a good understanding of the truth. And if people would stop saying, oh, I care about the truth, when everything about them shows that they aren't using methods that reliably lead to the truth, like as useful as a fable or metaphor or analogy can be, the truth doesn't require that. That is a method for gaining an understanding of something. And metaphors and analogies and fables can also teach things that are false. And so it's not the method that determines whether or not there's a true or false message here. And so once you begin to develop the tools that allow you to determine whether or not a claim is true, all of a sudden, God belief has to fall by the wayside. It doesn't mean you've concluded that God isn't real. It just means that you understand the nature of sound epistemology such that as it stands right now, it seems that we cannot currently confirm that a God exists. And until such time as we can, no one is justified in believing that. And as long as no one is justified in believing that, then the various pronouncements of religions can either be true or not true, independent of the God belief. And so now what we need is, I had to do this. When I no longer accepted Christianity, it could not identify that, did not accept the Bible, I literally sat down for an unbelievably long time, more time than it probably should have taken, although it's the reason I can do what I do, and said, okay, when I was a Christian, I was opposed to murder. Am I still opposed to murder? How and why? When I was a Christian, I was opposed to abortion. Am I still opposed to abortion? How and why? And I went through, I had an actual list where I went through all the positions that I, held because the Bible says so, or because a preacher said so. And I had to go through those. And some of those I continue to believe. I'm still opposed to murder. I am not opposed to abortion. As a matter of fact, I'm very pro-abortion, not just pro-choice. I'm pro-abortion. I think abortion should happen exactly as often as it is needed or wanted. But setting that aside, going through, hey, am I okay with marriage equality? I wasn't before. I am now. And what I discovered is when adherence to the truth and the best methods of attaining it became my foundation, instead of what does God think or what does a metaphor about God teach me, when those sort of things fell by the wayside and I just cared about truth and the best ways to attain it, it was reason, skepticism, scientific exploration, and the willingness to say, if I don't have a good reason to believe that something is true, and if I don't have a good reason to believe something is false, then my position should be open and there should be some default positions. And once I realized that the default positions were, let's make sure that people have maximal freedom, because you can either begin where nobody's allowed to do anything until we come up with a good reason why you should be allowed to do it. But that's a non-starter, because how do you come up with a good reason to even use that system to begin with? Instead, if you begin with everybody should have maximal freedom and we should limit freedoms for good reasons, what are those good reasons? Well, when your freedoms begin to impose on my freedoms, now we have a problem to solve. That foundation and things like Rawls' veil of ignorance, where you design the system not knowing who you're going to be in it, those sorts of foundations lead to a better understanding of reality and humanity than anything I've ever heard from any religion, any fable, any metaphor. And even if there was a religion that came up with all the same answers that I've come up with using these principles, it wouldn't be true because a religion says so. It would be true and a religion says so. Just like it's true, I agree with the Bible that murder is a problem. I don't agree with the Bible that slavery is okay. I agree with many of the things in Issa's take on Islam. I probably agree with virtually nothing in Daniel Hakikachu's take on Islam. Anyway,
I mean, he promotes like child abuse. I couldn't believe it, and he dabbles in paranoia theory. I heard him debating Aron Ra, I was streaming it, and he was saying about pod people, and I'm like, this is insane. It sounds like the people who went on January 6th.
Not only that, but his pod people thing in that debate with Aron was like, atheists want a world where we just live in pods and play video games and have sex. And I'm like, first of all, what's wrong with that? Like, genuinely, if I am able to keep living in a pod and enjoying myself in a pod, doing the things that I love, that means that I'm somehow or another financially secure enough to do that. What could possibly be wrong about allowing me that freedom? What harm am I doing to anybody in that model? But that's also not what atheists want. It's not what all atheists want. It's not necessarily what I want.
It's the first heaven
I think
ever
Jimmy
heard
would
of.
enjoy the. What's that?
That's the first heaven I've ever heard of.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the pod unless. I wouldn't want to be in the pod unless Arden could be in the pod with me, and that wasn't the model that he presented.
Well, if you get to have sex in the pod, presumably your pods are visitable.
Maybe. I think maybe he's thinking of it like
Ready Player One kind of stuff?
No, like TNG's holodeck. I think that's what he's like thinking of. And I'm like, the holodeck always seemed like one of the most awesome things. I was in favor. But anyway,
yeah, bro, you are not selling.
That was the end of my thoughts on that, Issa. I don't know if you had anything to add before we move on.
Well, and also on that thing too, it's problematic because he believes in a literal 72 versions, and there's also another problem too that a lot of people don't know about. Like, if you know Arabic, you know about this, but there's this interpretation in the Quran of Huri wal Wildan, and a Huri is sort of like a virginal maiden, and a Wildan is a little boy. So it could be, if you take this literally speaking, it could be, because Arabs as well as Greeks practice this, kind of, is it pedastry, like having relationships with little boys. Some could interpret it that way, of having multiple female partners as well as having small boys as sexual partners too. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not
if you're going to
on
insult
this.
that, I mean, that could be and plus he's taking a Salafi position, so he might literally believe that's true.
I'm not going to jump in on any of this because I'm debating him on Friday.
Sure.
And there are a number of things I want to save for Friday. But I will say that Friday is the first debate I have ever done where I requested security. I traveled the world and did shows and talks in front of audiences of thousands with Dawkins and Harris and a number of other people. And the only time I ever had security was when I was traveling with Sam Harris, because Sam has security. And cool, Sam gets to decide how much security he needs. I've never really needed or asked it. There were other occasions where there'd be like a security guard at an event, but no actual security. There will be security at this event next Friday, because I will be pointing out the consequences of things that Daniel advocates for, and how those have led to a number of violent and destructive things. Because while you and I were able to have a discussion last night about secular humanism and Islam, let's be honest, your version of Islam is dramatically different from both his and from every Islamic state. Sure. There's not an Islamic state on the planet that agrees with you.
Of course, but these Islamic states are completely corrupt, and they have a lot of cultural baggage too, and a lot of them haven't even looked into other perspectives within it. I think that's Pakistan is an example that does have Sufism, but the problem is a lot of fundamentalism came out, and they did a genocide in Bangladesh, and then Bangladesh has sex trafficking. It's crazy. There's a lot of, because I'm South Asian too, anyway, so it's like South Asia's a hot mess. But yeah,
let's save it, and because there's some more callers I want to get to, and you and I can have another conversation between my debate with Daniel and your potential debate with Daniel, if that ever happens.
So I want to tell you one thing about that, though. I was telling my mom about it. She's like, please don't debate Daniel. They might try to kill you. That's what she's terrified that the people will come after me and try to kill me. So, what you're saying, it's a concern, too. I want
There's a reason I asked for security.
Yeah.
I've only had fundamentalist Christians, quote unquote, come after me so far. But I've been more vocal there, I guess. Though I've made some Muslim response stuff. Issa, it was really good meeting you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in.
I'll talk to you later.
Have a great day. Yes, sir. Thank you, Jim.
They'd send me pictures of my mailbox.
Yeah.
Asking me when
genuinely,
I was coming for the mail.
One of the things, and there may be good reasons for me to suggest that Issa not debate Daniel. And that's because not only, look, if Issa tells me he's a Muslim of some stripe, he is. I'm not familiar. Like we were saying, there's no Islamic state that agrees with Issa's positions. There may be a Muslim majority country where a lot of those things that Issa advocates for are also there. I would say probably in parts of India might be one of them, but not in Iran or Afghanistan or Bangladesh or Pakistan or maybe pockets of Pakistan. The thing is there are different versions of Islam around the world. There are the African Muslims, and then there's the Indonesian Muslims, and then there's the Central Asian Muslims and things like that. And they're divided up into different groups, and not just Sunni Shia, but who are they listening to, and who is going to make the decisions for them? I don't know enough about Islam, and this is something that he's studied. I think it would be interesting to watch him and Daniel debate, but I don't know if it'd be productive because, I've watched some Christian debates. One of my favorite debates was Matt Slick. I've talked about it before. He was debating a guy, I think, named Jesse, on some aspect of Christianity. And, excuse me, my meds are making me annoying, giving me indigestion. They were arguing about some aspect of Christianity, and they both just cited Bible verses that agreed with their position and never pointed out why the other one was wrong. It's just like, well, here's a verse that supports my position. Oh yeah, well, here's this verse. And I'm like, that whole thing just shows how you can read the Bible, and depending on what you read and what preconceptions you come in with, you get a different result. You get a different view out of this. And I used to say it was my all-time favorite debate. It's in my top 5 debates for a number of reasons. I don't know that Issa could have a good debate. I don't know that anybody could have a good debate with Daniel, which is why I'm doing it exactly once. But I don't know that Issa could do it because it would seem very simple to just say, well, you're not a real Muslim. And while that's a no true Scotsman fallacy, Daniel saying it is going to carry much more weight than if I were to say it.
But also, you and I have talked about this before. If the thing that you're trying to establish is which of the two of you are actually more Quranic, for example, we've talked about this with progressive Christians. Progressive Christians, we prefer them because they're not very Christian if you're talking about Christianity being the religion which follows the Bible. And so if you were to have a progressive Christian versus even a William Lane Craig level, who isn't necessarily fully fundy, but is certainly plenty, and they're going with which version of Christianity is more biblical or God is more God's desire according to the Bible. It'd be very hard for a progressive Christian to win that debate on the merits.
Yeah. First of all, we have 4 callers left on the line. They'll be the last 4 callers of the show today. So Andrew, Ellie, Kevin, and Omar, please all stay on the line. Normally we put theists up first, but Andrew's been on hold for so long that Andrew, I'm coming to you next. I wanted to give a quick shout out to, I know a lot of you tune into this show every Sunday. Either Jimmy or myself tend to be here usually together. I'm thrilled to be here, to be doing this show. I'm thrilled to work on the line and everything else. While I would normally say that this is the best show on the line, there are people who disagree with me. And because of that, and because we all work together and ostensibly we're on the same team.
I never say this is the best show on the line.
See, but you're wrong a lot anyway, just in general.
I always say it's the Transatlantic Call-In show.
See, that's what I was getting to. Tune in tomorrow. They're on this very same network. By the way, we're at 94.2 thousand subscribers. If you're watching and you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and click like, click subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications, because I desperately want us. I don't know why round numbers are so appealing, but I just can't wait till we crack 100,000. Like, we should do something fun and big when we crack 100,000, like a 24-hour cause I wanna, or something like that.
That'd be dope.
But anyway, in addition to this program, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central, you have Skeptalk. Who's going to be on, Jimmy?
Dr. Ben and Forrest Valkai.
That is outstanding. Oh, wow. 2 people I greatly admire who are incredibly knowledgeable. You have the renegade science teacher in Forrest Valkai, and you have an actual medical doctor in Dr. Ben. No longer student Dr. Ben, actually made it through the first round of residency and is doing great. So if you have questions about science and medicine, tomorrow is the perfect day to call in and participate on the line. On Tuesdays, we have Dave Warnock, who I love dearly, a great friend of mine who is unfortunately dying out loud. He is dying of ALS, and his show focuses on his struggles, but also his triumphs and how he and others are dealing with facing a much more obvious and robust death sentence than the rest of us have. Jimmy and I are dying too. It's just going to probably take a lot longer, or at least we hope it does. Either one of us could get hit by a bus before Tuesday, and then all of a sudden Dave's show becomes about how he outlived us. For those of you who aren't aware, Dave will appreciate these jokes, and there are a few people that I respect and admire more. So if anybody's like, "Oh, Matt's being glib about Dave Warnock dying," no, that's part of what we end up doing. You can tune on Tuesday. Who's Dave's guest? Do we know Dave's guest for Tuesday?
No, it's TBD.
TBD.
I know who's been invited, but we're waiting for confirmation.
On Wednesday, I'll be back doing the hang up, and I don't know, because normally I'm here with Arden. I genuinely don't know who my guest is on Wednesday. I'm not sure if there's one booked.
I've got nothing on mine. No, I don't think we have anybody.
Then I might, if I don't have any other guests, I might rope Jimmy in again just because it's fun, but we'll see. And then on Thursday, truly, in many ways, and I'm being honest and only slightly reluctant to say this, truly my favorite and probably the best show on the line is the Transatlantic Call-In show. And I'm not just saying that because one of the hosts is my partner. Genuinely, between Katy and Arden and the various other co-hosts and guests that they get on that show, to show up every week, Jimmy and I have just mountains of privilege, and we're going to hover over the drop button. And if there's somebody who's just awful to us, it doesn't impact us at all, because our existence is not being threatened. But the Transatlantic Call-In show openly takes calls from people who are hostile to the existence and reality and rights of actual trans people. And so if you've been called transphobic or and you think it's not fair, you can call in and talk to them about whether or not you should have been called transphobic, whether or not you did something transphobic. If you are proudly transphobic or anti-trans, you can call into that show as well and explain to them why and maybe argue about trans ideology and stuff like that. I think this week, is it Katy and Arden again this week?
It's Katy for sure. Arden, we were waiting to find out if Arden was taking this week off because of other stuff, and so right now we have Arden off.
She's traveling.
Yeah, so
she's doing some work, so that probably won't be it.
It'll be Katy and TBD.
Yeah, Katy and TBD. So TBD is getting lots of work in this week. Anyway, those are the individual. Oh my God!
Yeah,
two of the people that I told to hang on dropped.
I almost think they were may have been hearing you do like promo stuff, but I reopened the lines in case they're calling back. We're only going to either put in alternative theists or those two if they call back. So Amargan will be jumping on screening real quick here soon.
Wow.
I don't know what happened.
I'm so disappointed. There were 2 atheists and 2 theists on the line. I announced that we're going to get to all 4 of them, and the 2 theists both disconnected. I'm just baffled. And there's somebody who's been on hold much longer. So Andrew in Ukraine, no preferred pronouns. Welcome to the Sunday Show on the line. What's up?
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Sure can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I had a question about the concept of revenge. Because it's something that I'm kind of I'm not sure how to feel about, because like in our culture, from like the films and everything, books and whatnot, like it feels like it's something that's wrong, right? Something that like a character in the end of the film after doing some revenge feels like it didn't bring anything good to them and stuff like that. Right, but at the same time, we all kind of felt sometimes that we want to act in a vengeful manner. So with the religions, it's kind of relatively simple. You just follow what the doctrine says. But what does the secular morality or secular humanism have to say about it? Is it acceptable behavior? And if not, why not? So that's my question.
I can't speak for all secular humanists or even the Council for Secular Humanism. I don't know if any of the version of the Secular Humanist Manifesto specifically touches on revenge, but I'll tell you what my thoughts are real quick, and Jimmy can add his too. Revenge or vigilante justice isn't justice. Justice done in secret isn't justice. And the individual who is harmed, while I may understand their desire for revenge, they are exactly the wrong person to be enacting anything like revenge, because they are not an unbiased party. The notion that we should be all treated equal under the law is a cornerstone of humanist principles as far as I'm aware. And if we allow for acts of revenge to be tolerated, we're suggesting that some people aren't going to be treated the same under the law, that the burden of proof that we'd have to establish in a court to determine, hey, do we have good grounds to think this person is guilty, and then impose some sort of penalty on it, that gets thrown out of the window, because the harmed party gets to determine on their own what they get to be judge, jury, and potentially executioner. And that is a system that does not result in equality for all. So on those grounds, I'm opposed to vigilante justice.
Yeah, Andrew, actually, it's funny. I talked about this on my Twitch stream earlier today. I don't believe in a justice system which is based on revenge either. I believe in a justice system. Instead of revenge, you have reconciliation and rehabilitation. Those are the 2 things that you want to prioritize. Now, the fact of the matter is there are going to be certain things that either you can't achieve that for, and certain people that just have to be removed from society. And then when it comes to justice, we still have, reconciliation can feel like a form of revenge, the sort of balancing the scales, and it can easily become revenge if things go too far. But taking a well-balanced approach. And as far as when you say you were struggling with it, I think I recognize what you're saying because I struggle with it. And so I point to things like there are judges who are very good judges, and I'm talking about legal judges, like a person who does it for a living. There are judges who are very good because they will cast a judgment in accordance to what is right according to the law, as opposed to what their personal feelings are. So obviously on the left, we get very excited when John Roberts or occasionally Neil Gorsuch, when it comes to some queer issues, when they actually vote against what is their personal beliefs and maintain what is constitutional and is the law. And I think about that, and I basically do the same thing. I, for example, don't believe in the death penalty. However, sometimes when I'm most recently reading about Danny Masterson sexually assaulting multiple women over the years, including people he was dating and then these people he had drugged, and how he just got 30 years to life, I know that in my self on the inside, I go, I'd just like it if he would just die. It'd be cool with me if he would just fucking die. And I get very hateful and rageful, but I recognize that there is also a system that is separate from me. And if I was in charge of some sort of legal system, I would put that aside, my personal feelings aside, despite the fact that I will still let myself feel that way. And a lot of times when you feel that way, even the things you think you're feeling represent something else, is something you learn in therapy. I have an over tendency to just go like, I wish that person would die in my head. And my therapist basically says, no, you wish that person had no effect on your life and you never even had to think about that they exist. That's what you're actually saying in a lot of those things. And then I say, then how come I imagine drowning them? No, that was a joke. I don't say that. But it is quite one thing to struggle with on a personal level, I wish somebody would die because they did something massively terrible, versus do I support a system that actually says the United States government, or in your case, Ukrainian or whatever, has the right to take its own citizens and end their life on the basis of a crime that they have committed, that they think they have sufficient evidence for, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that's sort of me as a secular humanist. I am not, even though it's important to identify that I'm a secular humanist, because I will often consult secular humanism and what seems to be consistent with that as a way to map out how I need to progress as a person, because my internal instincts sometimes fall short. I am not necessarily naturally a secular humanist, nor would most of human history suggest that most people are. Despite recognizing that it is a very good system.
Okay, but what if the system fails? What if the law doesn't work, or what if society just doesn't want to, say punish a criminal or something?
It's hard because we're talking about a very broad hypothetical, but
yeah, you
still live in that society. So are you asking, is it okay to go be Batman in that scenario? Probably not. Not even probably not. It's one of those things where this is what I actually said, because a question like this came up earlier. I can simultaneously recognize that in a story, a Batman story, Batman is awesome and I'm glad he did such and such, while simultaneously recognizing that if Batman really exists and went after the criminals and whatever, it would also be necessary to arrest and incarcerate him. He would need to go to prison and be removed from society.
If society doesn't do it, I mean, if society fails to impose and enact laws that protect its citizens, then you work to change society, and that can be anything from running for office, changing who you vote for, or all the way up to revolution. But that's not the same as just saying, well, society didn't punish this person who I think deserves to be punished, so I'm going to do it. There's a difference between that sort of vigilante mindset and actual, moving to take action that makes the world a better place. But acting unilaterally, I think, is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Okay. How about I'm going to give you like a specific example. There were multiple cases like that when, say, some criminal, say, assaults and kills somebody, and then their father retaliates, killing the criminal. So it's like I can't force myself to say that this father did something wrong, because when I imagine myself in his place, right, I just, like, judging this situation from the side, I cannot say that he did something wrong. And can you help me with that? Like, what's wrong about these actions?
He lives in a society which says when that happens, we do it this way, and he broke society's rules by taking it into. So even if you want to say you can fully feel, and I feel that way, I empathize with a father who kills his daughter's rapist, but I recognize that he has broken society's rules. And now, when he did that, when he took that into in his own hands and decided to do so, he also took into his own hands the consequences of doing that. So I'm not going to, if he had asked me if he should do it, I'd have told him no, and I would have voted to convict on that jury, knowing that was, though, by the way, oftentimes in America, that specific thing, people are often found not guilty or have hung juries. But that aside, he still violated the rules of the society he lives in, and those are the consequences for doing so.
But I can I can empathize with a father that does that. And I can say, ooh, I understand the desire to do that. But understanding the desire doesn't mean that I don't think that he's done something wrong. I can fully understand why people would want to do something that is actually wrong, because they think they're working to promote justice, that justice wasn't served, and so they're going to be the one that brings justice about. They're going to be Batman. I can understand the desire and motivation to do that, but I still think they've done something wrong.
Yeah, Batman still has to go to jail, sad as it may be.
So once he's done it, you think that's like something bad happened? Like you wish he hadn't done it, or rather, like do you think the world become worse?
So the thing about making decisions about how society needs to operate, you don't make decisions based on for each specific scenario. You pick out, hey, do we want to live in society where somebody just runs around killing the people who they feel have wronged them? And under that thing, he's wrong. Whether or not it's possible for somebody to be wrong, to be in the wrong, and still do something that makes the world a better place, or ultimately could easily be viewed as justice, all of those things are fully possible.
Yeah, it's oversimplifying to say is the world worse, or what, or however you put it, that is the world now worse? You also can't go burn down a McDonald's. And I love McDonald's, and it's part of why I will not die as old as I could die. And it is probably worse for the world that McDonald's exists, or any corporation, any giant corporation that fucks with the economy and keeps wages low and supplements their wages by instructing their employees on how to get welfare and all of these things while making record profits. That doesn't justify, I then don't get off of the hook for burning down a McDonald's. No one should burn them down.
You're saying this because you like it.
Well, I in theory, I like McDonald's, but I'm saying that we have rules in a society, and if those rules are wrong, your methods, as Matt said earlier, your reaction has to be trying to change those rules. And in a society that is progressing and is progressive, the rules will be getting better, and hopefully at times will be better than ever. Obviously, there's tons of corruption in the American justice system. I think we will look back in not that long of time after we make some fundamental changes to our justice system. I think it won't be long after that we really sit back and go, so we just kept doing slavery, huh? Because that's very much what we do here. We're going to make those changes, and those changes have to be made. But again, if you're in a society, and even I'm not even saying that I am incapable of being the father who kills his daughter's rapist. When I am speaking of other people doing something that violates the rules of society that would then have to face those consequences. And maybe this is helpful for you, Andrew, or I don't know, but there's a phrase that I have co-opted from a religious phrase and mildly changed, and it changes a lot of how I view other people and even other people that I'm angry at. And the phrase I use is, there but for the grace of circumstance, go I. I think everybody is capable of being everybody. Literally. We're all capable of being everyone else. And that sort of thing that takes things out of our hands, it doesn't mean you excuse something. I don't excuse the abuse I got from my parents because they were victims before they were abusers. But it can still help me, it can still ground me into places that are more effective and useful when it comes for my own mental progress and when I think about how I would want to affect society to progress as well.
Well, sure, but at a certain point, you kind of expect a person to take responsibility for their own actions.
No, I definitely don't expect that out of people. I hope that people would do that. Maybe you're using the word expect something, or I could say I would love it, but my parents are never going to take responsibility for the things they should take responsibility for. I would bet money against that, and I would be delighted to pay up if I ended up being wrong. While I'm saying have empathy for humanity and don't lose your connection to even bad people's humanity, because we're all capable of, not only are we all capable of being that, I feel I was that. I feel I was a wicked person at one point in my life. And so it has to be that we are trying to build a society which promotes reconciliation and rehabilitation over just simply revenge. Despite the fact that when I am wronged, especially when I am very wronged, I will feel the inclination and desire for revenge. And so it takes self-awareness and self-examination to sit and go, that's wrong. And I need to be more reasonable.
Okay. I also wanted to take this from another direction. So that's about like big things like murder and crime and stuff. But what about like more like day-to-day stuff? When somebody wronged you in a very, minor way, made you upset or something, and maybe there is a utility in sort of like responding to them in a similar manner. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying maybe there is a usefulness in that, as opposed to forgiving it so Andrew, they won't learn the lesson.
Who impresses you more, Andrew? The person for whom that rolls off their back, or the person who has a problem and responds, quote unquote, in kind?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understood your question. Sorry.
I'm asking it. If the options are somebody minorly offends you, you had suggested about, or you were talking about then responding in kind. I'm more impressed by the person who doesn't take minor offenses and who just moves on with their life than I am the person.
Surely, of course, there are some offenses that are minor, and I'm just going to let it go. But I'm saying something
I need an
where
example.
I would like the other person to learn the lesson. To know.
I need an example. I need an example of a minor day-to-day wrong and what you're asking with regard to revenge. Because if the revenge that you're talking about isn't something that is illegal, isn't something that is harmful, I need an example. What are you talking about?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because I'm just like speaking hypothetically here. I don't take much offenses. I don't really act this way. I'm just thinking about it like what is the right thing to do or not. So I can't really give you an example right now. I'm sorry. I
can't answer your question. If you're going to say day-to-day minor inconveniences and somebody reacts, my answer is if the reaction isn't illegal and doesn't cross an ethical line. Like, let's say somebody cuts me off in traffic. I could ignore it, or I could fucking flip them off. Flipping them off is free speech. Calling them an asshole is free speech. Should I do that? Probably not. I've been chased down before by one lunatic. But am I within my rights? Yeah. Is there a problem with it? There might be. We would need a lot more information about the scenario and how some people are reacting.
In the last thing you said, Andrew, you mentioned like that you might have the reaction of, I really want them to learn their lesson.
Me too.
Right. But like flipping them off, the people who cut you off, by the way, I have the same road rage issue. So I like this specific example.
It's better because Jimmy's car can drive itself. I have to actually monitor mine.
I can get my both hands out the window and I do. But so again, as far as the ideal, I'm not perfect. I don't meet the things where I go conceptually, I shouldn't do that. But if you have that idea of I want them to learn their lesson, or I want to teach them a lesson, I would say that you are, it could be that you could do that in a constructive way. If it's somebody who is under your care, a dependent, a child, we know that it isn't useful to hit them. We know that punishment even has a limit on usefulness if you aren't pairing that punishment. So like a timeout by itself does nothing if you aren't actually doing exercises with a child to make them, help them recognize why what they did was wrong. And so at the end of the day, it sounds like you're saying, what if you really want to satiate your desire to impose what you want on that other person? When this is why I say that thing about but for the grace of circumstance go I. You don't know that person. And I'm not saying it makes it right, but you don't know what their day is. You don't know how many kicks to the balls they just took for the last, 5 hours. And then they see you, and your face just annoys them, and they call you a name or something like that. And that's usually the shit. Usually the shit is when you have two people who hate each other. I've noticed this from internet culture a lot, and you end up putting them in an actual room to talk face to face, or even a video call or whatever. This happened with Kwaku and I. Immediately you start actually attaching onto each other's humanity and go, I'm really not that bothered by what a dick you were before. And so that short-term urge, but this is more like therapy stuff, man. I feel like, Andrew, I'm really just repeating the stuff I'm working on in therapy and learning in therapy. And so if you find that you're constantly feeling like you want to get back at somebody for minor shit you do, that's a big part of American man culture, where it is so easy to emasculate. I don't know if it's true of the rest of the world, but in America, emasculating men is just not very difficult. And I come from a family of easily emasculated men, and this isn't a man-only issue, despite the fact that I'm honing in on it because that's personal to me. If you take offense that easily, and then feel like you need to balance the universe because of the offense you've just taken, you probably have stuff more you need to work on, even though it can simultaneously be true that those people are assholes. And it can be simultaneously true that I'm going to call.
I think I'm coming across like an asshole. I'm sorry about that. I don't. I'm a very forgiving guy. I don't.
Oh, did I just mute with my? Sorry, let me fix this. Okay, you should be back.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Sorry, yeah, you said you're a very forgiving guy.
Yeah, generally speaking. So I think I can give you an example. Like, say, there is a family member who is, say, being constantly very rude to you and condescending and whatnot, and you explain this to them in a constructive way, and you think you convey your point calmly and reasonably, and at some point you just realize that they will not understand that they shouldn't be doing that until you sort of like show them how it looks, how it feels to be on the receiving end of that. So I'm talking about that kind of a quote unquote revenge. And when I said teach them a lesson, I think I didn't express this correctly. I meant like you would like them to change their ways because you feel like it's not really good things that they're doing.
So what you just described is actually manipulative if you're doing it if you want to talk to somebody and try and get them to empathize, like imagine if you're like this, but if instead you're saying, I'm going to manipulate a situation in which they get to feel what this feels like in kind. Again, you don't really, even family members, you don't really know what they're going through. You don't know what they're internalizing. And you don't, that sounds more like something that is going to have a higher chance of making you feel satiated by getting some kind of revenge than it actually sounds effective in teaching them any kind of lesson. I mean, just think about if they did it to you in the first place, how much did it compel you to want to work with them and help them out and, be lovey family or whatever else. It's you take those things on like you just got hit in the face. And so you're like, Well, now I want you to feel what it feels like to get hit back in the face. And no one gets punched after punching someone and goes, oh, well, now that I feel the punch, I regret my punch to you. It's okay. Well, now here comes back my punch again. You
think that doesn't happen?
I'm sure there's exceptions to every rule, but that's why we even know.
I don't think it happens. I think Jimmy's completely right. I think by the time somebody punches someone, they're doing it because they know it fucking hurts.
Yeah.
What good does punching them back do? You didn't teach them a lesson. It's not like they didn't know what it was like to be punched. They had a rough idea. Nobody goes around punching anybody unless they know what it's going to do.
Okay, I hear you. Can I go with another question?
Yeah, let's make this one very brief, though, because we've got 2 other calls and theoretically 7 minutes left. We'll go
sure. I was just I was listening to the debate that Matt had. I was listening to it today, and it was a very pleasant one. I enjoyed it, but I'm just wondering, like, what did you, Matt, get from this debate? Like, how were you different after it? Did you learn anything? What was new?
I learned some things about Sufism. I also can now no longer say that every Muslim apologist I've engaged with has been awful. I think there was a good demonstration that honest people who might have slight disagreements can have a discussion that doesn't devolve into shouting and anger, and that there are still absolutely despicable trolls in modern day debates chat, but sometimes they get shown how fucking stupid they look.
Word.
Okay. Thank you for the answers, I guess.
Thanks, Andrew.
Sure.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Good luck with everything.
Yeah. I also learned some things, which is why I went and had Issa actually show his slides. He didn't get to finish his opening presentation. And I probably shouldn't have, but I went ahead to give him a tip that next time he couldn't have wasted time on defining skepticism and just let his opponent do that, because he might have defined it different for me then anyway. But he had a good reason for that. But I wanted him to make his case. We got 2 more calls left. I'm hopping to the theist.
Let's do it.
Ronnie in Canada, no preferred pronouns of theist, who says the Hebrew Bible hates slavery. So Ronnie, welcome to the Sunday show.
Thank you.
What do you mean by the Hebrew Bible?
Well, the Hebrew Bible I'm referring to is the 5/5 of the books, 5/5 of the books of the Torah, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. That would be the Hebrew Bible proper.
And so it includes Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, where slavery is sanctioned.
Correct.
Okay. So it includes Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, where slavery is sanctioned.
Oh, did you say sanctioned? I don't think it sanctions it, but it allows for it.
It doesn't just allow for it. It doesn't just allow for it. It doesn't just allow for it. Exodus 21 has 2 different sets of rules for if you buy a Hebrew slave and how you have to let them go after 6 years, and how you can trick them into staying your slave forever. And then it has a separate set of rules for non-Hebrew slaves and how you can beat them as long as they don't die within a day or 2, and how they are your property in Leviticus 25 and Deuteronomy 24, I think. Yeah, Deuteronomy 24, Leviticus 25, about how these are your property that you can be passed on to your children. How is that? How are those verses that tell you who to enslave, how much to pay for them, how to beat them, how to trick them, and when you must or must not let them go, and giving different rules for male Hebrew slaves than female slaves, which don't get let go? How is that the Hebrew Bible being opposed to slavery?
Well, at the very least, it doesn't promote it. It's not pro-slavery, just like you are pro-abortion.
What about Deuteronomy 20 when it's commanded to take slaves?
It doesn't command it. 20, where does it command it? It does not command it.
Yes, to take the women and children as slaves of the Canaanites.
That's right. Well, they're supposed to. That's right. They are supposed to take those as slaves, but the Canaanites are exceptional in that they are one of the 7 tribes in.
Okay,
Canaan.
so it does sanction slavery, but Canaanites are an exception.
Well, it doesn't sanction slavery, but
No,
it does allow them.
A command and a sanction. What the fuck is the difference between a command and a sanction?
Ronnie. Yeah, here's the deal. So Josh, who's been on here multiple times, has written an entire book. I've done numerous debates on this, and I've done a video. You're saying what it says here in your thing is that the Hebrew Bible hates slavery, and yet in Exodus 21 and in other places, it specifically tells you who to enslave, how much to pay, how to treat them, how to mistreat them, how to trick them, and then in Deuteronomy it commands taking slaves. There is not a single verse anywhere in the Hebrew Bible that says do not own people as property, and there are verses that say these people you shall buy from the heathen that surround you. They are your money, they are your property, you can pass them on. And yet you're calling in to suggest that the Hebrew Bible is opposed to slavery. Where?
Good question. If I think you are right about all of those specifics, but the general idea, I believe you are incorrect with.
Go the fuck away. Go the fuck away, Ronnie. The book advocates for, commands, and legislates and regulates slavery. How dare you suggest, well, we can ignore those specific verses and go for a general feeling that it might be opposed to slavery. Go fuck yourself. Goodbye. No. You're done.
I don't even know the fucking. He commands, but it doesn't sanction, right? And it hurt my dad a lot more than it hurt me. He never said that, but that's the cliche. When he used the belt, he did use the belt, but he never said this hurts you more than it hurts me.
Let me be really, really, really clear here, because I don't believe that Ronnie was legit. I don't believe anybody could be legit and say, yes, you're right about what it says in all these cases, but the general idea is that it's opposed to slavery. No, if the book says to take slaves from the heathen that surround you, how much to pay for them. If a man sells his daughter into slavery, here's what happens. If the priest buys any soul with money, here's what happens. Here's how to trick them. The male slaves go free, but if you give them a wife and they have children and they don't want to leave their wife and children, you pierce their ear and they become your slave forever. Your bondsmen and bondsmaids, which you shall have, shall be of the heathen that surround you. Of them shall you buy bondmen and bondservants. There is not a single verse, not just in the Hebrew Bible, but there's not a single verse in the entire Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, that in any way explicitly condemns slavery. Not one. There are verses against man stealing, but that's about stealing other people's property or stealing people to become. Well, it's about indentured servitude, which is also immoral and also slavery. If you're calling in to suggest we should ignore all of the actual verses, that's like Leviticus 25:46, you shall take them as inheritance for your children after you and inherit them as a possession. This is all about owning people as property. The Bible explicitly permits owning people as property, legislates owning people as property, gives you rules. It is beyond disgusting that people would call in to make excuses for this, but to say, yes, all those verses are there, but something in the spirit of the book is opposed to slavery. Fuck you, you fucking liar.
Yeah. I guarantee you, if he was serious, the only argument that I've heard people hit that stupid say and still be serious are usually God recognized that they were going to do slavery, so he wasn't sanctioning it, but he's saying you're going to do it anyway, and I'm not going to effectively stop you. So if you're going to do it, here are my rules.
Which is incredibly stupid, because that means you have the weakest ass little bitch God who can say, if you eat shrimp or pick up sticks on the Sabbath, I'll fucking kill you. But since you're going to keep slaves anyway, let's at least be slightly nicer about it than we can. Your book is disgusting and immoral, and that doesn't just apply to Christians. That applies to Jews. Everything from Genesis to Revelation, from Genesis to Malachi, if you want, is vile and despicable when it comes to human rights and slavery. There is not a word that suggests that slavery is immoral, and there are many words that suggest it is not immoral. How dare you call in and pretend, well, if you just ignore what the book says and go by what I think the book means, yeah, go fuck yourself.
If it's the same person, they might be in chat saying you were too scared to listen, but the mods are on top.
DJB, send us an email where you cite where the Bible comes down in opposition to slavery, and if you are correct, I will read it on the show. But I've debated people left and right. How dare you suggest that I'm afraid of your dishonesty? That's bullshit.
Also, if you've watched the show, we're not exactly afraid of words, people. Jesus Christ.
Hey, are you supposed to be going to a show now?
Yeah, but we'll take Ellie's call before we go on.
I don't know if it's Ellie or Eli because it could be a typo, but pronouns to they, them in Texas and Atheist, thanks so much for waiting for 2.5 hours. How can we help?
No, hello. It's all good. Ellie and Eli both working at both at the same time, if you will, if you can. So, anywho, it was actually kind of cool the way that you ended the last call, because it can somewhat segue into my thing, which is necessity in terms of the problem of evil. And what I kind of saw, and maybe the last thing is, I do not support this view by any means. However, is potentially one way you could say that it sanctions slavery yet is against it, is saying that slavery is somehow a necessary thing. Like, this is a fact of the world and it has to happen. And you know, it has to happen. We don't like it, but here's what you do about it. Here's how to do it.
Not really an excuse for an all-powerful God, though.
Yeah.
Again, I don't necessarily defend it. I just thought it was a good segue into my thing.
Plus, it's false. It is not true that it's necessary, because some of us have abolished it.
Yep.
So if God thinks that slavery is necessary, if God thinks that slavery is necessary, God's wrong.
Yeah, I agree there. If anything, that was just me doing a bad idea and giving some theists
no worries.
food to chew on. Then maybe they shouldn't be chewing on.
Let's just move to your thing, Ellie.
So my thing was I wanted to look at the problem of evil, because whenever I see it like debated, I presume y'all know what the problem of evil is. I've heard y'all debate it before. Actually, I don't even know how I would say that. Anywho, oftentimes a lot of the stuff that's brought up, a Christian might say like, hey, this might be necessary in some way. It's good for the development of one's like spiritual being or something. Obviously, I don't necessarily think this is the case. Like, you know, something like a hurricane or stubbing your toe or wanting to hurt someone. I don't necessarily think these things are absolutely required. But what I have to wonder is that in most cases about the problem of evil anyway, it seems as though it's kind of coming down to whether or not the evil is necessary. So what I have to wonder is, it seems to me then that it should just be called the problem of unnecessary evil. And I don't know why people wouldn't call it that.
Sure. I've heard people refer to it as the problem of unnecessary evil. I've heard people refer to it as the problem of excessive evil. I think the reason it's referred to as the problem of evil is that, generally speaking, when philosophically and religiously we're talking about evil, if it's necessary, it's not evil.
Okay.
We often use the phrase, oh, that's a necessary evil. But what we mean is that is an unfortunate thing that we're just not going to like.
It's just like kind of part of the event sort of deal.
But the view is that that's not evil. That evil is not a hurricane. Evil is the malicious act of thinking agents in violation of what is good. And so you could make your argument, the problem of unnecessary evil, the problem of excessive evil. I've heard people do that before. I know philosophical journals that have phrased it that way before. But generally speaking, it's called the problem of evil because that's what it's traditionally been called. And to say, oh, but we're only talking about unnecessary evil is pointless, because the things that we would identify as necessary evils, like hurricanes, aren't evil. Even if you view them as if they're directed by God, there's a magical gay shield that protects us from them anyway.
I'd go with like chemo.
Magical gay shield.
Chemo is a good example, I feel like, of a necessary evil, because it's something we decide to do. It's poison, but it's not, so it's not actually evil. But it feels like it is because it's awful.
Yeah, chemo is an attempt to kill the cancer before it kills you.
Yeah.
Before it or the chemo kills you. Similarly, you could say, oh, is it immoral for me to slice your throat open? Well, it is, unless I'm doing a tracheotomy to allow you to breathe and continue. So you don't get to say, oh, that's a necessary evil. No, it's not evil at that point. It is a necessary thing that we would view negative under different circumstances, but the circumstances change that.
Yeah. I think that's the reason I'm saying it is that it seems as though, now maybe I'm wrong in exactly what the problem of evil is supposed to be getting across, but it seems as though it's always, I guess a very more basic way of putting it is a sort of like, gotcha, like, hey, here's this thing that is, it's an evil, there is no possible good, like ultimately good at least, explanation for this, and therefore, that's incompatible with God, yada yada. So that's why I was thinking it was more so that, and in regards to like hurricanes too, I don't know, from some Christians I have seen that just described as evil because it's like kind of a result of evil, so to speak, like
it's because I keep making out with dudes.
But I've never.
No. You don't get to go down the theological route of saying, so another thing about the problem of evil is sometimes referred to the problem of harm. I saw somebody in chat point that out, which I've talked about as well. You don't get, it is a theological assertion that there was a fall and that the fall is responsible for why this world is corrupt. You don't just get to assume that, you have to prove it. But also you have to make that make sense in the light of a God. And so if there is a God that is actually good, how could he allow a creation to fall?
Okay, I think I normally just kind of grant that whenever I'm talking about it, because I don't, at least from when I've debated with people, it doesn't necessarily seem like something that is harmful to grant, the fall, that is. But that is a good point, because otherwise, I guess there's not anything necessarily inherently evil about, just things that happen, so to speak.
How would it not be harmful to grant the fall? If you're in a debate, you're saying it's not harmful. Harmful to what? To grant them the fall.
Well, mostly because I like to give people like benefit of the doubt to some extent, and I do see that as I don't know the words for it, but like giving them benefit of the doubt to some extent.
But if I'm granting somebody something in a debate, I would be saying, okay, even if I say the fall happened and all of that, this thing you're still advocating for would be wrong. And I don't know how to do that with the fall. I don't know what to do. I just wanted to hear an example. This isn't a significant point. It just caught me off guard that you would grant the fall, because as a debate tactic, it would mean that it actually isn't necessary for the fall to be true or false for me to win the debate that you are wrong in your proposition.
I think the reason for that is mostly because that's just kind of including what can be included as right or wrong. Because like even if we don't apply it to like say hurricanes or stubbing your toe or whatever, we can just move to something else, even if you do not grant that. But I do kind of view it as maybe in some cases too like a time saver. If you don't grant the fall, then they're like, well, hey, the fall did happen. Here's all these things, and it kind of just sidetracks from there.
Well, if you're ever going to debate man's evil being responsible for hurricanes, don't grant the fall in the future. I just wouldn't grant anything magical.
Yeah.
I think it'll go poorly. Anything else before we let you go?
I think it's kind of like a mundane thing. I think there are still reasons that you could do it. You don't necessarily need to. I do see your point, though.
Sorry, did I miss something?
It's just better to be more accurate, I think.
By the fall, we're talking about the Adam thing, right? The Adam and the Eve and the apple?
Sorry, you cut off in that first part of the sentence.
When we're talking about the fall, were you and Matt talking about, because I zoned out, so maybe I fucked this whole thing up. Are we talking about the apple story, Adam and Eve?
Yes, yeah.
So how would it be mundane to grant the fall of Adam and the sins of humanity being responsible for hurricanes?
If you grant, for the sake of argument, the Genesis fall, you are granting God, sin, rebellion, Adam and Eve. You are granting everything.
Yeah, I was so confused.
Yes.
The only thing you're not. The only thing you're not granting is Christ.
Yeah, the redemption.
So what we can do there is kind of like it's granting, say, I don't know a good example because I'm not very good with math, but say granting a part of someone giving you a certain formula for math and then showing how if you grant what they're saying is true, that their formula is contradictory. I think that's kind of the point with this. Is making it sort of the like internal.
Stop. It is called a reductio ad absurdum. Go look it up. Go learn about it. But you don't, if you grant the fall, I don't know how you turn that into a reductio ad absurdum. You got a lot of work to do before you can justify. Matter of fact, create a syllogism that begins with the biblical fall happened, then premise 2, and then what conclusion do you reach that would show that the biblical fall didn't happen?
Okay. Well, one thing, I'm just processing. It might be a good time to end, though.
If you need time to figure it out.
Take time to call us back.
Time to figure it out, yeah.
I would take a slightly different, I would take maybe an easier one to hit. Matt's is good because it's impossible. If you could start with one that's a premise of the fall happened and has middle premises and then ends with, therefore hurricanes are not a result of sin, or that it's unreasonable to point to sin, hurricanes.
Yeah, that's, I guess you can fill that kind of gap. Yeah.
You probably can't. So here's the thing. Call us back if you can.
If you can.
Let us know. If you can fill that gap, we'll try it out. But in the meantime, if we have any advice for you, it's don't grant the fall.
Okay, yeah.
It's like, it's the whole fucking game.
I'm trying to process how it is necessarily that bad, because I've never necessarily experienced any problems with it, but that's why I'm having to think about it.
So when you call in, and you try and you put it to words, spend some time. If you have to write it out, spend some time, and and when you call in, we'll help you realize why it doesn't work with your exact example.
Or why it does.
I think in any case,
I'm not saying it's impossible to create a reductio absurdum by granting the fall. I just don't know what one would be, and it doesn't seem that you do either.
Yeah, again, that's why I'm thinking I would have to give it some thought for that. But I do agree, though. I think at this point it would probably end up being just I could do it, but not necessarily something that needs to happen for defending use of granting the fall. That's the proper way to word that, right? It might not be very useful to do that, because I'm seeing what y'all are saying now, because like in any case you can still do it without having granted the fall anyway, I think. Working with the problem of evil, that is. But yeah, so I mean, I'll look into it, but again, more so as a fun thing, because now that I'm thinking about it, it's not something that you would even need to do anyway, but maybe you could. That's, that would be the whole point of looking into it.
If you figure it out, we want to hear it.
Yeah. All right. That makes a lot of sense, though.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Alec.
All right. I think that's all I got. Yeah. Bye.
Cool. Well,
I'm going to go read the Book of Mormon with Aron Ra. Y'all are welcome to come with us over on Aron Ra's channel. Matt will be off naming snakes. send some live chat in the last. Oh, you already did all of them?
I did them. I finished up right when the show started. They were only getting number names. We are not. So there's like 30 babies, or maybe there's 33 babies, and we're not naming. These are babies that are going to be for sale. We wouldn't give any of them a normal name. But what I did was like, they're named like C1-1- this SPGL, and that lets me know from 2023 they're in this clutch, they're this snake number, and they have these genes all in one little name.
Well, anyway, leave a comment with what you think the best name for a snake would be. That's the comment challenge. I'll go in there and I'll pin the one I like the most next week. Somebody remind me next week. Pin the one you like the most to that episode.
Sweet.
We'll do it. All right, let's go read the Book of Mormon. Also, this is supposed to run. This is a thing. I love you, baby. Oh, I need to get the. And there are the people. Go to patreon.com/calltheline, become a patron. These are our top tier patrons, the patron producers. We'll have more events and exclusive content coming to Patreon very soon, as well as working out some games and stuff we can play with y'all. Patreon.com/calltheline.
Stop making excuses for your religion and be a better person.